Joe Rogan Podcast. Check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
You know, I grew up in D.C., and I think about the people, you know, who are my teachers and, you know, my parents, my friends' parents, and, you know, they're sort of at the forefront of, you know, troops coming home and getting fucking spit on, and you got people, you know, you're coming out of, you know, Jim Crow and people, you know, people going down south and getting lynched, you know, in Meridian, Mississippi, and you know, and then these assassinations. I just can't imagine what that must, like a string of assassinations. And just given the conversation, you know, if you're talking about the most fucked up time when you think everything is going to complete shit and it's just Harry Carey. Like, what would, I mean, imagine if right now, you know, in the string of next week, like Kanye was assassinated, Trump was assassinated, you know, like, I mean, I guess you had the thing at Pelosi's house. I mean, I guess that's like kind of weird, but like, it's also kind of like,
weird.
It's just weird, right?
Yeah.
But like, imagine that, like, imagine what we'd all be saying. I mean, it's like, you know, I think in the last couple of years, we really saw how close, how fragile this whole thing is, and how close this thing can go to just breaking down, and you're kind of on your own. But I just, you know, to have like both.
Yeah,
both
you got
Kennedys,
a good point.
you
Yeah,
know?
like
what did that feel like?
John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, all these murders, all these assassinations, very close to each other.
You're talking about what, like 68, and then also you have, I mean, not to the same extent. I don't know how it would register now, but you had Altamont, you had, you know, and then again, just, you know, scores of, you know, you had troops coming home. You know, like, think about how we regard our military now, and the reverence and respect that we treat our military, and think about, you know, these troops coming home getting spit on. You know, people throwing, you know, red paint at them, you know, in the airports. Like, think about that. Yeah, you know what that says about us.
Imagine if they had social media back then.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point. And then, you know, all the other people that died during that time, right? Like all the rock stars, like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, everyone's dying. Yeah, it's just like, and then the 70s come along, and, you know, you have fucking Watergate, and Nixon's gone, and like all the chaos in the country.
Totally. And everybody's just manically horrified. You know, you have the previous generation just absolutely fixated on this new war on drugs and what that means, and then you have these great. I mean, who would be the equivalent of Hendrix, Morrison, and Janis Joplin now if they all, you know, died just like that? I mean, look, we've got people getting shot in the street. You know, we've got you know, what was his name from Migos? He just died. Offset just died.
No, not Offset. The other guy. Offset's still alive. He's the one who's married to Cardi B.
Right. It's
the other guy got accidentally shot by one of his friends. Yeah. They were in the middle of some gunfight, and one of his guys accidentally shot him. Yeah, but there's just we're so aware of the violence now, and gun violence in South Central, and gun violence in South Side of Chicago, and gun violence in Baltimore, and so I think we're probably more acutely aware of the, like, just because of the news cycle, just because of social media. But I think you're right in terms of the turmoil, and also you go from like the tone of the 50s to the 60s. You have like a completely different style of culture is emerging. The psychedelic style of culture, and the music is different. You got Woodstock, and it seems like there's this, you know, Hunter S. Thompson wrote about it. Like, what happened after all that happened, it was like you could just see this wave of change, and then it pulled back. Yeah.
Got a little bit too much for everybody, you know?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, is it? But it's all like these monumental shifts, and then everything sort of kind of tries to balance itself out, and then you have these new dilemmas and new problems.
I would imagine it is. You know, I have a friend named Tony Maggio, who's a sort of legendary drug cop in Baltimore from the East Side, and he's from the community. He's got the complete and sort of utter respect of everyone in that department, not just on the East Side, but citywide in Baltimore. And also he's got the respect of people on the street. And he sort of talks about now, and just talking about these soldiers coming home in the Vietnam era and what that was like, I really equate that to kind of everything that law enforcement's going through right now. We have these, for the first time, with Vietnam, you had these images. I wasn't alive, but from what I hear, you had these images coming into people's living rooms of these, horrible situations. People talking about the My Lai massacre, people talking about these things, in Vietnam, and to the same extent now, we were just sort of, there's so many examples of, crazy and rampant sort of police brutality. You have these instances that were then magnified to the point where people who have no experience, in this world would think that this is what all police are doing. And all of a sudden you have this unbelievably just strident anti-police movement in this country. And, and the result of it, in a lot of places, is a total increase in crime. And talking to Tony about it, he really believes that it's just a pendulum. It's just a pendulum. You go one way, then you go the other, and he thinks it's gonna really swing back.
Well, I hope he's right. It seems like that's always the case, as long as there's not some sort of a catastrophic thing that happens, like a world war or something that literally like flattens society and civilization. I mean, generally people try to move things in a better direction. It's just setbacks and all these things that happen along the way. I think culturally we're all trying to move towards a better direction. I mean, that's why there is so much outrage. And, when we have this anti-police sentiment, it is because of all these horrible, egregious examples of police brutality that we see. No question. The right way to do it is not defund the police. The right way to do it is not like this attitude towards all law enforcement, which is crazy, because some of those same people, they're going to find themselves in a situation where they need law enforcement. Absolutely. And then what do? They look like hypocrites, and it's a lack of understanding of the scope of the overall problem.
And I think a lot of the times the conversation is just really being led by the wrong people. We're looking at pundits and celebrities and so-called experts in these situations. We're not talking to the people that are actually on the ground doing the job, people from the communities. And I think there's a lot to be learned from those folks. Yeah, oh, no doubt.
It seems like there's also this problem of there's so much information to sort through. When you're dealing with this 24-hour news cycle and social media, you're dealing with most of the things that people concentrate on are negative. And so you're dealing with negative consequences and negative actions from billions of people. And we're all trying to filter it out and apply it to our everyday lives while everyone's freaking out about climate change, while everyone's freaking out about the war in Ukraine, while everyone's freaking about the drug problem and the border problem, the cartels and fentanyl and shit.
Yep. Yeah. And everything's designed to just sort of be delivered in the most unnuanced, the most just sort of bright lights. Hey, pay attention to me, and that's scary. The truth gets really lost, and these issues are, they're enormously complicated, and they're not easy. And trying to say that they are, or trying to just sort of deliver an agenda or say I'm on this team or this team, I'm on this side or the other side. It's, for me, I find that enormously un-American, and I find it, I think it's a huge mistake, and it's not the way I want to live my life, or it's not the way I want my kids to live theirs.
Agreed. Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. We have a horrible tendency towards tribalism, and in this country, there's definitely this trend. I think that's also exacerbated by social media and the algorithms, where people are they're holding up on teams and attacking people on the other side, and all of it is kind of fucked.
Yeah, and isolating even more and more. And I think that I really think that the lines in which we're dividing ourselves, so many people have talked about the polarization. It's like one of these things. It's like everybody talks about it, but we still kind of still march to the beat of that drummer. And I think that the lines that divide us, they're so porous, they're so insignificant. They really, there's no value based on those lines ever, in my opinion. I think, we miss out on so much by holding people back or saying you are on this side or you're on that side. And I look at it, in terms of the way we our prejudices and these things that we ascribe to, I look at it, in that movement that we were talking about, to sort of jump to this conclusion, if you've never been in a situation where you've really needed the police to say that all cops are bastards or abolish the police, or to say that, folks in these communities, that where the violence is going down, in sort of the most violent cities in America, to think that those folks that are from those communities don't want more policing there is just a huge mistake. And I really feel like, when I talk to my friends in Shreveport, Louisiana, or in Baltimore, that is not the case. And I look at it a lot of times. If you had a football team and you felt that, I just don't want any homosexuals on my football team. If you're just like, if that's how you felt, there could be somebody on that. You could have somebody on your team who's 6'5", runs a 4.40 40 and just can demolish people. But because of your own stupid prejudice, because of your own just ridiculousness that you ascribe to, you're missing out, and your team's got to fail.
Right.
And it's just such it's impossible to thrive. It's impossible, and I just find it so unbelievably un-American.
It's definitely un-American. You have such an interesting, nuanced perspective, which, I don't want to say is unusual for actors, because I think actors are just human beings and they vary widely. But to be a guy like yourself who decides, hey, I want to put these opinions out there and I want to talk about things in this sort of nuanced and, objective way. Like, what made you decide to do that? Because that's very unusual for actors. And it's also unusual for actors to do it well. Like, you don't come across as someone who's trying to sort of soften your words or say things in a way that's virtuous so that people like you more. You seem very genuine in what you do. And to do that as, like, in a podcast form, the way you're doing it, it's almost like it's like, did you get any people saying like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this?
100%.
Yeah?
Yeah,
this could be a liability, John.
What are you doing, dude? You're throwing it all away.
Why do you have all these opinions? Shut the fuck up and be the Punisher.
Yeah, I know. And honestly, man, I have huge trepidation. I have huge hesitation. And I don't necessarily think it's for the reasons that you just pointed out. I think, for me, not to be grandiose about it, but I love acting. I love it, and I think in a lot of ways it genuinely saved my life. And I think that I imagine I'm a huge fan of yours, and I listen to your show religiously, and I imagine that's similar potentially to how you feel about comedy. I feel about acting. I feel like it's a lifelong pursuit. I feel like it's something that failure and humiliation is always on my shoulder. He's always there talking to me and whispering to me, and it's always a fight that I like fighting. You're never going to have it licked. You're always got to get better. There's always further you can take it. There's always a grind to it. You can always. That's how I look at it. I love it, and I'm beholden to it. So anything that kind of gets in the way of that, or I've been kind of conditioned to think is the enemy. And to be honest with you, one thing that I'm quite certain is the enemy of that is putting more of myself out there.
Right.
I'm really not interested in being, more well known or so to be honest with you, there's a lot of trepidation about it in that way. I think the more you hear from me, the more I share my views, just the more time in the box you get of John being John, the less you're going to believe me as a tennis coach or as a mathematician or the Punisher or whatever it is. And so that is, but I will say, the intentionality behind the show is something I genuinely believe in. I think this all kind of came forward, in COVID, in sort of the wake of not only George Floyd, but in just all these examples of this police brutality and this rampant police brutality and the fervor that kind of came after it. I was really in this situation where, like so many, I was so disgusted and heartbroken and angry watching that video, and Eric Garner, and I mean all of them, but George Floyd, and I really wanted to get out there and be part of that. Be part of that protest and be part of that uprising. But at the same time, I turned on the TV and I saw people throwing bottles at police officers. I saw people throwing bricks at police officers. And to me, every single one of those police officers is a brother, a sister, a son, a daughter, someone's best friend. And I was disgusted by that. And I really, I'm very grateful for kind of how I grew up and where I grew up. I grew up in Washington. I have I have black folks in my family. I grew up extraordinarily with familial and best friends and ties very much into the black community, and I'm very much, I think, aware of the struggles that black folk have been in through the city, and especially their struggles with police. I myself have been beaten by the police, but I've also had my life saved by the police. And I also believe that so many of the folks that were sort of leading the charge in this anti-police movement, and also so many folks that were leading the charge in this anti-Black Lives Matter movement, there are folks who really had no experience, really in it. It was just people kind of like arguing from the polls, flag waving from the polls. And I was seeing something kind of in America generally where strength and patriotism was being confused with being rigid or being steadfast in your views and completely unbending, and an unwillingness to sit down with somebody that thinks differently than you, and to be confident in yourself enough to say, hey, you're an American, I'm an American, and like I might learn something from you. I don't have all the answers. And I think at that time, the genesis of why the podcast started is I looked at, okay, well, on one side, you've got, in this anti-police movement, who is the most, who's the archetype that everyone is sort of most afraid of in that? And to me, it's the plainclothes unit, aggressive, take the fight to the criminal police officer, right? And then on the other side, who's the archetype? Who are we all afraid of? Okay, well, maybe it's the African-American gang member. And, to me, I looked at my life, and one of the things I'm most grateful for is I have really, really, really dear, genuine, close friends who fit both of those bills. And it's my assumption, because they are actually in it, pitted against each other at times, but they are on the same streets dealing with each other. There's so many times that they have opportunities to see good in each other, to find things that they respect about each other. I find when I spend times when I go out and ride along, and I spend time with plainclothes police units, they'll look at their own groups and they'll say who's really about it and who's not. They find flaws within their own community. With a lot of the guys who have been really successful in the criminal world, it's the same. And they're able to reach across this sort of so-called aisle, and they're able to say, hey, there's something about that guy I really respect. I really dig what he did. I really dig what that person did. And I found that they'd kind of appreciate the same things. They'd laugh at the same things. They're a lot closer than they are further apart. And I just thought that these were really the people that I want to listen to. I want to listen to the people who are actually in it and who walk the talk, walk the walk, don't just talk about it. And that's really where the idea for the show started. And sorry, it's such a long-winded answer, but I would also just say about it, man, the trepidation I have in doing the show is quelled a bit, because I just really, really believe in the folks that come on. The show is not about me. I'm not. I don't think I'm particularly good at it. I don't think I'm particularly that interesting of a guy to be leading these conversations. What I think I have is this unbelievable group of friends, both because of how I grew up and because of what I do for a living, that people talk to me, and I've become really, really close with them. And asking somebody to come on and talk about these things it's not easy. It comes at a cost, but I'm really grateful for it. And I giving these folks a platform, and these are precisely the people that I want my kids listening to, and the two sort of things in my life that are most important. It's my work and it's my family. So at times those are opposed to each other, but ultimately I really believe in it.
How long did this stew in your mind before you ultimately decided to do something?
It stewed in my mind for a while, and we started doing them, and it sort of fits and starts.
So what was the first one?
So the first one that we did was exactly what I'm talking about. We did it with my friend Jerry Ballesteros, who's he's a crash unit cop.
So how does this conversation start, and how do you decide to start doing this? How do you say, you know what, I am going to sit down with people, where you just I don't feel like their side's being represented. I feel like I have something to add to this, or I feel like I have a unique position
Not
where
me.
I can kind of bring people together.
Yeah, not me. Them. Yeah, I guess there's that. I have friends who, especially if you look at South Central, specifically, Newton Division in South Central, it's historically one of the most violent. They call it Shoot Newton, one of the most violent precincts in the entire city. I was enormously close with some of the guys in that precinct, and Jerry Ballesteros is sort of this legendary cop there. He's lost people on the street, and he's gone all the way, and he's a guy that's respected. I believe in his reasons.
Was he the first guy you sat down with?
So he's the first guy I sat down with, but I sat down with him, and I sat down with a guy named Dante Johnson. People call him Bojangles on the street. He grew up in the Pueblo Bishop housing projects. The Pueblo Bishop housing projects and Newton Division are right next to each other. They've been sort of set against each other forever. People call him Bojangles, like I said. He's a community activist. He's somebody who's given so much back to the community of the Pueblos. But he was also he was part of the Pueblo. It still is part of the Pueblo Bishop Bloods, and these guys knew each other. They knew of each other. They've come into contact with each other in the street. And, at first, getting them together was, it was difficult. It was hard. And
that's a big first step.
Yeah.
You're going to get into podcasting. This is that's a very big undertaking.
Yeah, but again, man, it's, I don't know.
You just felt compelled?
I did. And look, I think at the time, my cousin was in a band called Fountains of Wayne, and right in the beginning of COVID, when it was first sort of popping off, he died way too early, left two daughters behind. Only person in my family really that showed me that it was possible to kind of be an artist, and it was really, he died real early. He was sort of like, hey, I'm sick, and I'm going into the hospital now. I got this thing, and hey, I'm on a ventilator, and never came out. And his parents couldn't go visit him. His kids couldn't go visit him, even though they were a mile apart because they closed off the hospitals. And so I live up in Ojai, California, in a place that
Yeah, I know.
COVID, yeah, so COVID almost didn't really exist there at the time. But then again, when the George Floyd uprising, popped off, I really wanted to get out. I really wanted to be a part of that. But then again, when I saw the anti-police movement, anytime I'd go and protest, I'd also stop by Newton Division and just pay my respects. And I just was so frustrated that I couldn't be both. I'm so pro Black Lives Matter, but also super pro law enforcement, and understand that these things are not mutually exclusive. So that's kind of where the idea came from. But with these guys specifically, it was really hard to get them together. There had been an officer-involved shooting at the Pueblos right at that time, and there was an ongoing case. And what was interesting, the way that we came around is Bo, he started an acting school in the Pueblos in South Central with Shia LaBeouf years ago called Sloss and Rec. And Bo himself, is an acting student and an actor himself. And there's a show that I wrote about Shreveport, Louisiana, and I wanted to do a reading of it. And so I got Bo and a bunch of guys from the Pueblos, some of whom were active gang members, to do this reading of the show. And I brought in a bunch of industry people and a bunch of agents and managers to come give these guys an opportunity. But the place that we had the reading was at a place that was sort of run by my friend who's in the LAPD. So you had these cops coming in at that time, setting up chairs and hanging lights. And you had these ex and current gang members performing, and to put them all on mission together and put them all sort of into, by the end, everyone's hugging each other. And now, we're setting up a show with Jerry and Bo where they both love fishing. So they're going fishing and they're taking people fishing with them. But this is the whole thesis. And
right. What
I expected to happen really did. I know these two men. I believe in these two men with all my heart. I respect these two men limitlessly, and I knew that they would laugh at the same shit. I knew that they would be finishing each other's sentences. Their experience is what binds them, and again, they can point out flaws in each other, and at times they do in the episode. They can point out flaws with the system. They can talk about things that are grossly unfair. This is one of the things that sort of came out that was so interesting is, Jerry was talking about, being, a decades long veteran of the LAPD, how, places would give him free coffee. He would go eat for free. But now walking in, in uniform, people wouldn't let him in, their establishments. And on the other side, you got Bo saying, yeah, I've lived with that my whole life, man. You know what I mean? And there's real points of connection that way. And then I just think from there, it just, I believed in that thesis, and we just kind of kept it going. And I got a group of people around me that I think really believe in it as well. And yeah, man, so this is what we're doing.
One of the things that separates people so much is the lack of communication, and the fact that you're able to get those two guys to sit down and communicate. That opens up doors to so many other people, and it opens up doors of possibility in people's minds where they can watch that conversation and go, you know what, at the end of the day, we're all just people, and we all believe in what we believe in, and oftentimes we look at the other people on the other side as being the opposite or being the enemy, when in fact they're just other human beings.
That's it.
And we have way more in common than we do like conflict.
And I think with with how isolated everyone is, and everyone wants to say I'm on this side or on this side.
Yeah.
It's like if these two guys can sit down to
Right.
each other, who have again lost freedom, lost lives, lost friends, taken lives, in this so-called war, but they can actually sit down and strike a real, genuine friendship,
And then go fishing.
and then go fucking fishing. Like, what are you doing? Like standing on the
Yeah.
side, being like, I hate those people, but you never,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Yeah, I believe in that. I believe in that with all my heart.
Well, what disturbs me is that absolute lack of nuance that some people have, where, it's this side is bad, that side is bad. And all that is exacerbated not just by social media, but also by foreign entities that are embedded in social media that continually stir up this sort of strife and stir up this conflict. And it's done intentionally to try to divide us. And that sounds like very tinfoil hat, but it's all been proven that this is going on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. It's so clearly a weakness. It's so clearly a weakness in the fabric and the structure of our society. So
Yeah.
of course look, man, I lived in Moscow for 2 years.
Did you?
And yeah.
What were you doing over there?
I was really kind of a fuck up as a kid, Joe, and
All my favorite people were.
oh boy, yeah, I took it. I don't know, I took it to a different level maybe, but I was really lost as a kid. Got into a ton of trouble. Went to school, played a little bit of sports in school, but I was getting in a lot of trouble. Trouble with the law. Trouble. Ended up not being able to finish school, and I got really into acting in college, almost as a whim, no aim. It was just almost on accident, and I met a wonderful woman there named Alma Becker, and she ended up marrying my wife and I. She was and she was sort of fascinated with Eastern European and Russian theater. And when I got done sort of like being in trouble and when I couldn't finish school, I had decided this is really what I wanted to do. And I really wanted to be an actor, but I had no kind of frame of reference. I didn't think it was any different than being a plumber, being a lawyer, being a cop. Like, what are the steps I have to do? This is what I want to do for a living. She sort of explained, well, it doesn't really quite work that way. But, you know, she said that, look, if she were I, you know, she thought that the best theater school in the world was the Moscow Art Theater in Russia. And she said, you know, I can get you an audition for that school.
The best theater in the world is in Russia.
According to her. And
really?
And I certainly believe that. I mean,
really?
if you look at it, I mean, kind of historically, you know, all of acting that we that we celebrate is you know was really like the kernel of that all started at that theater, at the Moscow Art Theater.
Really?
Stanislavski and Chekhov. Yeah. The first play they did was The Seagull, and they put that play together in a summer home outside Moscow, and then they came into the city and they put it on. And up until that point,
what year was this?
This was in the 1920s. So basically all theater, all acting up until that point was very presentational. It was very go to the front of the stage and kind of proclaim to the audience, you know, face outward. And what Stanislavski came up with, what you hear in his method, which is not, you know, like sitting in your own shit or having people call you your character name. That is not, you know, method acting. This method that he came up with was really about realism on stage. So if you're drinking tea in a scene, really drink tea. Turn your back to the audience. Talk as if you're actually in the situation. And in 1933, they went on a world tour with this play, The Seagull. They went through Europe, and then they went to America. They went to San Francisco, to Chicago, and to New York. And that changed acting. All of the sort of great American theater training, you know, from the group theater with Strasberg and Uta Hagen, it all came out of their exposure to this one play. Nobody had ever seen acting like that. And it all started at this school.
How did they figure that out? Like,
how did who figure that out?
The Russians. What was the genesis of that?
You know, I think it was, you know, it was this unbelievable conglomeration of a rejection of how theater was before that, but also, you know, like so many things, it takes this sort of perfect storm of people coming together. You had Chekhov, who, you know, look in the Eastern European world, and you know, Chekhov to Russia is very much what Shakespeare is to us. You have this guy who is writing in this unbelievably realistic way, who, you know, examined human behavior. He was a doctor, and he really looked at it. He really looked at life sort of in this sort of like omnipotent or omnipresent way, like he was looking down on it. For example, you would have somebody who was, you have a love story. The Seagull, there's always some confusion because it's called a comedy, but it's really ultimately the lead character takes his own, like kills himself at the end, and it's very tragic. But from a doctor, there was something really funny about all these people who are in love with the wrong person. I'm spending my life wanting to love this person. I want this so bad. Yeah, but right next to you is a person who really loves you, and you're ignoring that. And just sort of the feebleness and the fragility of human behavior, and really examining it. These small characters, giving them real emotional life on stage. You know, that's so you had this in the writing, and then you had this brilliant actor, director, Stanislavski, who just thought, you know, what if we actually play this for real? And it was a completely revolutionary thing. It changed everything. It's the style of film acting and theater acting that is literally taken over everything today.
That's fascinating. I would have never known that. And so you go over there, and what is it like to go over to Russia? Did you understand and speak Russian? Did you have to learn that? Did they speak English?
So I was over there in the late 90s. It was a totally wild time to be there. And I think looking back at, you know, maybe why Alma wanted me to be there was, you know, probably because I was such a wild kid and I was so lost and doing so much kind of fucked up stuff. That
so you just pack up your shit?
Yeah, man. And back then, you know, no email, no
right.
phone. You know, you go over there and it's like, you know, you don't talk to anybody. You don't talk to anybody from your life here. And I think very much, I think she knew I needed to get out of here. And so I think that was part of it for her. But, Russia, I can't, I mean, the way I would describe it is unbelievable beauty with unbelievable brutality. For me, there's no way I would be doing what I do today if it wasn't for my time spent there. You had this unbelievable appreciation for the arts. On every corner, there's a statue of a playwright or a poet or an actor. Being an actor was an enormously masculine thing to do. It was the training itself was highly rigorous. From playing college sports and doing fight training, it was by far, without a doubt, the most disciplined and physically strenuous work that I've ever done in my life.
How so?
So basically the way that the school works is, you have thousands of kids that audition, and then they take 100, and then every semester they'll cut that class in half. So you're kind of fighting for your life the whole time you're there, and they'll graduate 10 kids. And these kids are coming from all over the country, and it's really kind of like, if you get into that school, it's kind of like this golden ticket. It's kind of like, there's at the time there's 10 times more theaters in Moscow than there were in New York. Theater is religion there, and I'll definitely explain to you sort of why that is, especially coming out of communism and how important theater was and the role it played. But if you graduate from one of those schools, it's not like in America where a lot of theater training is very coddling and it's very like, okay, you can't really play sports, you're not the best student, but come to the theater where you can be a tree and everybody's kumbaya and we get along. If you can get through one of those schools, you're funneled into one of the major theater companies. It's such a huge achievement. They're kind of guaranteed employment after that. And the people that get the honor of teaching in Russia, it's the highest honor you can achieve. So my teacher, Oleg Tabakov, he'd be the equivalent of like Robert De Niro here. It's if an acting teacher walks into a room, it doesn't matter even if you're in public. If you're a student of that school, you have to stand up, and you can't sit down until they sit down. And there's just this unbelievable respect that's built in. You need to learn acrobatics. You have to train ballet. You have to do
acrobatics.
Acrobatics.
So you were training in acrobatics and ballet while you were learning acting?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
How do they structure that?
How do they structure what?
How do they structure that kind of training?
So it's at first, in the first year, I mean, look, in the first year you're there, there's no text. I mean, all of the training is in your voice and in your body, and in rhythm. You learn rhythm, which is something that's like not taught here.
Rhythm of communication,
everything,
rhythm of dancing.
Everything. So rhythm of objects, like literally just learning. It's studying rhythm. So you and I would be we would be tasked with putting on a show, completing rhythms, like off rhythms and how do I explain it? Like I'll give you an example. Like one of the training exercises would be training your attention, your concentration, right? So you would read a newspaper article, and they would tell you to concentrate on one paragraph, and you would read that to yourself. And while that's happening, everyone in the class would be asking questions. Say, Jamie, what color socks are you wearing today? He would answer. Then Jamie would say, Joe, what did you have for breakfast? You would answer. Somebody else, and we would go around, and everybody would, while you're reading the article. Meanwhile, the teacher would be clapping, snapping, or coughing. When it was over, he would point to anyone in the class. You have to know how many times he snapped, how many times he coughed, how many times he clapped. Then he would go around and he would say, what did Jamie eat for breakfast today? You would have to know all that. And then he'd have you stand up, and you would have to recite the paragraph that you just read. And you would have to be able to answer any of those questions. So it's these extra, and that's kind of what the method was. And then when you get into the acrobatics, it's really getting just much, much more limber. I played football and baseball. I played in college. I was very, very sort of, I lifted weights. I was a very just tight person. So it was just like partner stretching the shit out of yourself, and then learning how to do, have people kind of climb up your body, learning how to, you're either a support. I guess the equivalent would be like gymnastics or some sort of like, high level tumbling, but you had to do all that, and ballet as well. Not until the second year are you actually, speaking text. All of it is just movement based, observation based.
Wow. So it's almost like a boot camp. Like they're building you up
I think so. And then every every couple months they let you know that whether you're allowed to come back or not, and so you have people's dreams kind of shattered. And I think more than anything else, man, it's the vitality of it. Look, during communist times, public gathering was outlawed. So, you couldn't go to church. You couldn't get a group of people together and speak. Audiences were illegal unless they were politically based and controlled by the Kremlin. So there were a couple state-based theaters, state-run theaters in Moscow, one of them being the Moscow Art Theater. But they had to do pro-state shows. And the thing is a lot of these people, Meyerhold, for example, he's one of the most famous Russian directors. He was lauded by the state as this, unbelievable hero of the Russian theater, and Stalin. They would go and they would see his plays, but then somebody looked at it, and all of a sudden they said, you know what? I think there's actually an anti-state message here. They executed him in his apartment. So actors were sent to prison for being in a play that all of a sudden somebody just deemed as anti-state. And for me, my main teachers, they did this play called Cinzano, which was about three guys. One of them lost their moms, three best friends. One of them lost their mom, and it's just the three of them sitting in this apartment drinking a bottle of Cinzano and just sort of lamenting about this loss. And they'd been putting this play on for 30 years once they were my teachers during communist times. So they would do this play in subway tunnels and abandoned buildings. Had they been caught, they would have been imprisoned. Anybody who was in that audience would have been imprisoned for going to watch that show. But they did it anyway because it was that vital to them. It was that important to them. And, for me, again, thinking, I'm this like kind of tough kid from DC and that I knew what the hell I was talking about. Like being around people that were operating with that set of stakes, where the history, the palpability of the tumultuous history that is alive in every breath in that city. Again, the beauty and the brutality. It was a game changer for me. I mean, look, man, one sort of brief anecdote. When I first went over there, I think my third day there was my birthday, and again, just I lived in a place called Park Kultury, which is Gorky Park. It's kind of a pretty rough, sort of shitty area in Moscow, and I had a translator. I spoke no Russian at all when I first went over there, and my translator Max came and picked me up where I was living. And he took me to the Moscow Art Theater, which is on Tverskaya, right across the street from Red Square. It's a few subway stops in a couple different directions to get there. And once we got there, the one thing that they tell you that's absolutely essential at all times is you always have to have your papers back then. At that point, the mayor ran the mafia, the mayor's police. They didn't really have a salary. They made their money by what they could sort of shake people down for. So we get to the theater, on my birthday and my first day of school, and I think like I'm actually making something of my life. I'm here in Russia, but me being the fuck up that I am, I forgot my papers because I'm just unadulterated asshole. And I said to Max, man, I'm so sorry, man, I forgot my papers. And he said, okay, well, we got to go back and get them. And I said, nah, man, let's just go into school and we'll do it the next day. He said, no, they're not going to let you into the school without your papers. Let's go back and get them. I said, look, man, I'm a grown-ass man. Let me go back and get my papers. You don't have to come with me. You just took me here. So I convinced him to let me go by myself. And then again, me being the asshole that I am, and everything's in Cyrillic, I couldn't read anything. I got completely fucking lost, and I just had no idea where I was. I'm 3 days in Russia. It's getting dark. I'm screwing up. I finally make it back to my place. I get my papers. I make it back to the school, but now I've missed the first day. It's like completely dark, and I'm on the wrong side of Tverskaya, which is like this main street, about 16 lanes, and I got to get to the other side to get to school. And I just start kind of like Frogger. I'm like dodging cars like a total asshole. I'm like, I can't get to the other side. As soon as I get to the other side, boom, AK-47s in my face. Russian police are right there. They get me for crossing. You're supposed to cross below. I didn't know that. They're yelling at me in Russian. I give them, 20 rubles. They let me go. And I'm just such an asshole. It's my birthday. I've missed my first day. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And so I do what any good American would do. I go and treat myself to a meal at McDonald's, right? So I go and I get myself some McDonald's. Happy birthday to me. You're a fuck up, right? Then I'm going back that night, and I'm back in Park Latour, and I'm walking down the street. I'm all by myself. It's pitch black out. It's cold as fuck. And I'm walking down the street, and this Mercedes pulls up in front of me, and these two guys get out of the front seat, and they reach into the back seat, and they grab something out, and I see it's this woman with beautiful red hair, and she's in like a beautiful cocktail dress, and they're pulling her out of the back seat of this Mercedes. And I'm the only one on the street, and they clearly don't see me, but this woman sees me, and she makes like direct eye contact with me. And they're pulling her out of the side. They're pulling her out of the back seat. She's not fighting them, but she's not helping them either. She's just like completely limp and just being dragged. And they take her over to this building, and they just start like opening her head up against the side of this building. They just start smashing her head. So I like forgot where I was, and like I ran at this guy, and I grabbed him, and in English, I'm like, man, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? And he just pulled out a gun. He just put it like right to my forehead, and he said in English, he's like, "Go away," like that. And you know, Joe, I knew like in an instant, man. I knew in an instant that like it was like I was a bug. Like I was a bug. Like that was a different. You know, I'd seen guns before. I'd seen stuff before. I just knew that this was a completely different level. And so, you know, I walked away listening to that, to what they were doing. And you know, it was like day 3. So that's on the brutality side of it. But I think conversely on the beauty side of it, you know, there was just it was a culture that I found like completely free of pretension. You know, if you have a conversation with somebody, you really have a conversation. You look you in the eye, and there's no, "Hey, how you doing? Hey, I'm doing great." There's no bullshit. It wouldn't be strange or weird to have somebody break down in tears in your first meeting and talking to them, and not because they're sort of like emotionally fragile or weak, but because they're just so honest and in the moment. I saw this unbelievable national appreciation for the arts. I saw people who, you know, you go on the subways and people weren't reading, you know, Us Weekly. They were reading Bulgakov and Tolstoy. It's an unbelievably literate society. Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm so grateful for my time there, and it really, you know, Alma and that place really saved my life.
How bizarre is it for you now to see this conflict that we're going through with Russia and Ukraine and the United States involvement, having spent time there?
How bizarre is it? You know, I feel horrible. I'm devastated for you know, my friends there. I'm devastated for it's such a different Moscow. It's such a different Russia than what I knew. You know, there was a free press there when I was there. It was like, you know, it was the Wild West, man. It was everybody was exploding, you know, in this new freedom, and it was such an optimistic. You could feel the fragility, but there was also, man. You know, if you bump somebody's foot by accident standing on a sidewalk, they have to step on your foot. It's like a Russian tradition. So if like you bump into somebody, they have to bump into you back. If there's a line, you know, a lot of people just didn't believe in lines. So like somebody will just cut right in front of you. You know, I remember when there was the situation at the Russian theater. There's a hostage situation where they just kind of went in, and those people were being held hostage. So they put in gas and they just kind of killed everybody. I think there's something about, you know, I had a friend who was in the FSB, a young guy, and if there was an issue with the police, if we were being loud or somebody was trying to shake us down, you know, I had this 21-year-old friend who was in the FSB, and this 21-year-old kid, you know, could yield such unbelievable power just by put the fear of God in soldiers with guns like that, and that's something I don't know that we have an equivalent of that. I saw that there was I remember them talking about Putin and with George Bush at the time. I remember there was that thing, and like, I looked into his soul, and it's like a great man. Are we really connected? There was this thing that there was an understanding among Moscovites that he would just toy with this guy, and things like deception and things like manipulation were things that were celebrated in a leader. They weren't. We do the same shit, but we're not allowed to talk about it. We're not allowed to celebrate it. It's un-American. But that style of being ruling with an iron fist, it was still very celebrated, and many Russians, I think, really ascribe to that. So I guess I'm heartbroken. I'm heartbroken, and I'm heartbroken for all the people that, all the young men that have fled and left, and the families that are being torn apart. I'm heartbroken for what's going on in Ukraine. But I guess I'm not that surprised.
The strong leader that is such a big part of Russia, and to have this powerful leader who leads with an iron fist. That seems to be something that they embrace. It's a part of the culture. It's a part of the history of that part of the world.
Absolutely, and making hard decisions and understanding that things, aren't clean. I mean, look at I think many Russians would look at World War II and the way that they handled that war and the way that they approached that war militarily, was I don't know how. It's interesting. I don't know if that would fly here, but.
Well, look at what they're doing in Ukraine when they have these mobile crematoriums, and they're just taking the Russian soldiers that die and just.
Yeah.
But they don't even have a count of the bodies. There's not even an accurate count of casualties.
And look, I think one gun for every 5 guys in World War II. Pick up. When that guy dies, pick up the gun. But look, you look at the way Patton approached, the armor units in World War II. Our tanks, couldn't compete with the Germans' tanks. They just couldn't compete. They looked at those tanks. They said, "There's just no way that a Sherman can compete with a Tiger. It's just not going to happen." Well, I know what we'll do. We'll build 5 times as many. So yes, that's an unbelievable achievement of American industry, an unbelievable achievement of the war effort back home, an unbelievable achievement of the engineers that were on the front line fixing those tanks. But what's the other side of that? It takes 5 Sherman tanks to take down 1 Tiger tank, so we're just going to produce 5 times as many. But think about all those tank units. What does that mean for the men inside those tanks? What does that mean? That means we have to put in 5 times as many people, and that when they go, we got to get a new unit out there. And it's very similar.
It's a totally different mentality than what we're accustomed to.
That's right.
And the way we think of war, and we think of sacrifice and casualties.
I think so.
Yeah, it seems to be a part of the culture, and it seems to be something they don't have a problem with.
Yeah, I mean, whether they have a problem with it or not.
That's probably not the right.
Probably,
expression.
yeah, right. I mean, like, I don't know. It's I've had one friend of mine. I can't use his name, but I've had him on the podcast a couple of times. From Russia, and he's Ukrainian, and his family's in Ukraine. Sort of just telling us what's going on the ground and what the sentiment is in Russia at the time. And I think for a lot of people there who are able to sort of like ignore the propaganda and look beyond it and try to get to the truth. He looks very much at his own culture and his own government as a cancer. And he looks at Putin as an absolute criminal. And, he's saying that, he's risking his life by saying that. And how Putin deals with his political foes. And it's, even as I say this to you, man, it's my gratitude, to that place and to that culture, it's limitless to me. It's like I'm able to do what I love and and feed my kids and have a family, and I'm so grateful for it. And it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for there. And I'm just I don't know how this is gonna end. I don't know how it ends. I don't know how it works itself out. And I hate that.
How do they get objective information over there? How do they get past propaganda?
Yeah, so
it's all state sponsored and state controlled.
Everything, right? And again, look, I want to be. I'm no expert. I mean, I've talked to the people that I've talked to, and I know for this, for my one dear friend, he is able to access free internet, real internet, open internet, and that's how he's getting his information. But I don't think that that's an easy thing to achieve. And contact with people in Ukraine, the disparity in what the propaganda and the national sort of news outlets are saying versus what people are saying on the ground. And then I think what was huge is this draft. That this was just supposed to be a military exercise, and then all of a sudden people are being called up. And look, it's a one thing I'll say about being there that really affected me as well is I've been to so many countries, as I'm sure you have, and everybody has this sort of like nationalistic. People love their country. People want to celebrate their country. In Russia, I'd never seen anything like it except for here. Like, are you a strong man? Okay, good. Then you're a Russian man. You're a good. I played pro baseball while I was there, which is definitely not a big achievement at all. But you're a good baseball player. You're a Russian baseball player. You're a good actor. You're a Russian actor. I mean, it's just like good and quality. It's and I think we have that as well. And I've never really quite seen that sort of unadulterated, just absolute. Love and reverence for their country than I had in America.
The unique quality of their combat sports athletes speaks to that culture.
Yep.
Because, I mean, Fedor Emelianenko, one of the, if not the greatest heavyweight of all time, came from Russia. I mean, the Dagestan region that produced Islam Makhachev and Khabib Nurmagomedov and Ankalaev and so many elite fighters, and the caliber of the athlete that comes out of there, both in wrestling, other combat sports, boxing. I mean, they're just very, very exceptional, which speaks to the quality of the character of the people that come from that culture. Yeah, and I think too, when you talk about the traces of Soviet times. You had you owed it to your country, to be you weren't there for your own sort of achievement or your own money that you're trying to put on the table, your own glory. It was about your country. It was about something bigger, and so I think people will suffer for that. You have in the same way, one gun for one weapon for every 5 men. You got to work harder, and I think that's something that's really come up in this draft too. I think that even people who are adamantly against it do feel like why should this other Russian man die in my place? So I'm going to go. Did you ever watch the documentary Icarus? I didn't, but I meant to. It's a crazy documentary. It's insane, but it's a big part of it is about the doping that went on during the Sochi Olympics, which was all completely state-sponsored, where they swapped out. They literally put performance-enhancing drugs in all of their athletes, every single one of them. They were the ultimate goal was to achieve the highest level of performance in the Sochi Olympics to elevate Russia and to show Russian superiority. And they managed to do this through this Gregory Rodchenkov guy. And he, just by total happenstance, runs into this guy who produces this documentary, who's a cyclist. And he decides that Brian Fogel, he wants to do this race completely clean, and then he's going to go to Gregory and tell him like what his goals are, what he wants to do, and this guy's supposed to be the head of the anti-doping agency in Russia, but really it's bullshit. He's the doper.
The doper, yeah.
And so he tells him exactly what to do and how to do it and how to cycle off. And during that time, then it gets revealed while they're in the middle of filming the documentary. Brian, who's a brilliant documentarian, brilliant filmmaker, just steps in shit, just totally gets lucky, and finds himself in this situation where Gregory and the Soviet Union, or excuse me, Russia, is getting exposed for doping, and he has to flee the country because he's a part of it. So he comes to America and just completely spills the beans, tells them exactly how they did it, what they did, and now to this day he's in witness protection, and they're hiding him, and there's assassination attempts on him. He's completely fucked, and they've taken his family and taken all their money and pulled them out of their homes, and it's a wild, chaotic thing, but it shows what kind of commitment they have to this idea of Russian exceptionalism and Russian conquering in sport.
And how far they'll take it if you reveal and if you go against them. And look, I was in a car the other day when I landed here yesterday from Savannah, and the guy we were just talking about Austin, we were talking about Texas, and he was just, the guy was from El Salvador, and he was just like, just like people in this country just don't appreciate anything, just have no idea. It's the greatest country on earth, and like they just have no idea. And that really also was and is my big takeaway for spending time over there. Just how unbelievably lucky we are here. And I know, we started the conversation from out there about just how fucked up everything is, and of course it is. But like, look, man, I'm like a guy who fucking puts on makeup and says lines for a living, and I can come on here, the biggest platform in the world, and we can talk about it. The biggest threat, to me is that like I'm going to lose an acting role. You know what I mean?
Right,
it's like, that's a real thing, man. And I just think, this country is just, I just think so many people in this country have no idea how good they have it and how great, to me, it's the best country on earth.
It certainly is, and it's just we don't have a reference. If you're here your entire life and this is how you view things, and you're like, well, this place is fucked up.
That's right.
And it certainly is. It certainly, we're human. Humans, we're filled with all sorts of flaws. And this culture and the way our civilization is run is filled with all sorts of flaws. But it's the best example we have for a free society currently on Earth, which is hard for people to believe, especially people that look at all the inequality and look at all the chaos and look at all the things that are wrong with this country. And there's certainly a lot. It's still the best place.
Agreed.
Because it's the best place to communicate. It's the best place to openly communicate. That's why things like what we were talking about, like with FBI being embedded in Twitter, trying to suppress certain narratives, it's so dangerous because that's what leads you to communist China. That's what when the state has total control over the narrative, and then the people that are involved in financing all that and profiting from all that are the ones that put these people in power and then control how the masses behave and think and communicate. It's leading us down this slippery road, and that's what scares the shit out of people, and I think rightly so.
Agreed. Yeah, I think we also at the same time, I think we need to be vigilant. We need to be educated. We need to look into these things, and I think we also need to not jump to conclusions. And I think we need to be very cognizant about who we're listening to, and honestly, it's platforms like yours. It's finding people that we trust, that we just know, okay, look, this guy at least is telling his truth. There's no agenda behind it. They're not trying to convince you of anything. It's so unbelievably vital to hang on to that and to know that people do have their hands in this information.
Yeah, do they have any kind of podcast like this in Russia? Is that even possible to do?
I don't think so, man. Again, like I'm not, I remember when I was there, there was the Moscow Times and there was the Exile. You've had, right on, man. Yeah, it was there was this explosion of free press and really like gonzo journalism over there, and but I don't know, to be honest with you, man, when I was there, I was a little bit sickened by the expat community. You know, there was a real sort of like hedonistic, I mean, look, I think probably a lot of it was me being kind of self-important, and I was on this kind of like acting pilgrimage, and I took myself super seriously. But, you know, there's a lot of people that were going over there to, you know, be with as many Russian women as they could, and there's a lot of people going over there to sort of, I felt pretty that they were exploiting, and you know, there was very distinct different Moscows when I was there. You know, there was the Western version of Moscow, which was just, you know, totally different. And then there was, you know, for me, what I think was so lucky is that I was going to school with Russians, you know, with people, you know, you'd have kids who would bring their entire families down from the mountains, from the Caucasus. You'd have like 9 people in a little apartment, and the whole family would be like cooking on a hot pot because this one kid had this opportunity to go to school there. And it was this like level of support and encouragement, and, you know, the relationships that I formed, you know, with these people. We grew up so wildly differently. The connections were so beautiful, and you know, you had. You know, I just, I don't know. I was really lucky that I got to be in Russian in Moscow that way, and that's not an easy thing, and I'm worried about whether that's even possible now.
Did you learn Russian?
So yeah, I mean, when I was there, especially playing baseball, you know, none of those guys spoke any English. I had a translator in school, but yeah, I got all right. I mean, one thing I've noticed that, you know, when I'd come home, you know, when I'm around Russian people, I always try to speak a little Russian, and there's just this, you know, this. I don't know whether it's pride, I don't know what it is, but I'll throw out a couple words, and they'll just answer in English. They're like, "Fuck you, motherfucker! I learned your language. I don't want to hear your fucking pig Russian, you butchering our. Who do you think you are, motherfucker? You know, like, but you know, like. While you were there, like there were people that you knew spoke English, and they would refuse to speak it over there. It's like not going to happen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you learn how to read it?
A little bit. That was harder. I mean, like if I really, you know, take my time. But I mean, you know, at that point I could barely read English. You know, I mean, I was just such an asshole. I mean, I remember when I was there, you know, we'd have these things called Black Tuesday, and all the teachers would come in, and they would sort of tell you whether you could continue or not. And they would kind of each break you down about like your strengths and your weaknesses. And you would just see people just crying their fucking eyes, like being devastated walking out of there. And I remember, you know, I walked in there once, and these teachers were like, John, they're like, John, your talent is like a gem, but they're like, but it's completely unformed. You lack any semblance of elegance. And, you know, like they're saying this thing, like push you know, like they're saying, and then like you got like you're waiting for like the shoe to drop with the translator. And then they're like, we bet you've never read a book. And I was like, yep, gotcha. I've never, you know, like bingo, you know what I mean? And then they're like, you know, from this moment on, never let there be another day where you're not reading a book. And I took them up on that, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, I took them up on that. She really was some of the best advice I ever got.
How do we shift that over to here?
Dude, gotta read.
Yeah.
Gotta fucking read.
You gotta take in other people's perspectives and work. It's a vital part of being a human being.
That's right.
And it takes a while for people to understand and read that, or understand and you know, take that in. It's so important for the human condition, and it's such an unbelievably available resource here in America. And yet people would rather go on TikTok.
That's right.
It's such a hard thing to encourage too, because it requires discipline, and if you're not raised with discipline, if it's not incorporated into you very early, it takes a monumental shift in the way you think about life to incorporate that.
How do you do that with your children?
Well, fortunately, my kids have been around me when I've been, you know, during the time that they're alive, I've been at my most disciplined and most best. You know, thank God they weren't around me when I was 21. Right. You know, and they're seeing an example of someone who works hard and works all the time and has a lot of discipline, and also wants to talk to them about things. And I want to talk to them about the value of difficult things and about failure and about like sports. They're involved in sports, which I think are very important to kids. You certainly can develop assholes through sports, but I think there's something about winning and losing and effort and reward for that effort that's a vital part of being a human being. And through that, through sports and through any difficult thing, you develop your human potential. I think you only find it through struggle. You only find it through a difficult thing to acquire or a difficult thing to accomplish, and then doing that and recognizing that your boundaries are actually movable and that the boundaries that hold you back now are not permanent.
That's right.
They speak to your state at the moment, but that state, you can advance that state, and you can do things to make your perspective more nuanced and enhance it, and hopefully they can learn from that. But there's also the problem that they're growing up in a loving household. They're growing up, the examples they have is of people that are very kind and nice, and I think you do need to be exposed to a certain amount of assholes to understand the full scope of human beings.
No question. And I feel so much of my job as a father is creating this kind of adversity in my kid's life. I have to, and I need my children to learn the lessons that I've learned. I just really can't have them learn it the way that I learned it, because that it could have gone either way.
Yeah. And most of the time, it doesn't go the way you went.
That's right.
Yeah, it's like if you get 100 kids and you thrust them into horrible environments, very few of them come out to be this person who has forged themselves through the fire of adversity. Most people succumb, unfortunately.
I think that's right, and I think most people also don't have. I mean, look, I mean, through all the trouble and all the shit that I got into, I had a loving, supporting family who had my back, and I think that's when I think about the inequality in this country. I mean, one of the main themes and what I'm trying to do with this podcast is just I've seen firsthand how the legal system, how so many of the systems that are in place, people who don't have that infrastructure, it is so grossly fucking unfair.
And they don't have an example to go off of. One of the things about human beings is we imitate our atmosphere.
That's right.
And we become accustomed to seeing people work hard, achieve things, and people that are kind and ethical and honest. And we look at that as like, that's a value that I want to aspire to achieve. And if you don't have that around you and all you have around you is crime and drug-ridden streets and gang violence, and you don't know any other way to think or behave, you don't have an example of it. And there's very little effort done to change those neighborhoods. I mean, if you look at the amount of effort and the amount of resources that we pump into other countries, and we pump into the military, we pump into all these various things, we always seem to have money for it. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you're a child and you're being raised in this community that it's essentially been the same way for decades and decades with no help.
That's right.
You feel like an outsider, and you feel like the system is rigged. Absolutely. In many ways, it is.
It is. I couldn't agree with that.
Yeah,
more. I couldn't agree with that more. And I think you know, in terms of our children, it's how do you get to them to see that, understand that, experience it a little bit, but also understand those inequities and try to inspire them to do something about it. And I think for me it's just, again, people talk about like masculinity and this term that gets thrown around all the time, like this toxic masculinity and whatever the fuck that means. And I just think that, again, it's like, what are the examples that we're putting forward, and what are the examples of people, as fathers, what kind of men are you surrounding yourself by? What are the things that are important to you? And I think it's not, to me at least, it's not, some sort of rejection of these classically masculine traits. I think that, having the ability and understanding you have the responsibility to keep your family safe is absolutely essential in being a man. In providing. I think having a healthy relationship with violence, having an understanding of it. I think, teaching your kids to have a relationship with violence where they're not being ruled by fear or shame, but they can have some sort of understanding, they can touch it, they understand it a little bit, they know what they're doing. I think it's essential. And I also think, being accepting, being kind, being open, being generous, being empathetic are also, part of being a man. And I think that, oftentimes, because so many of the people I think who are kind of leading the charge and who have, so much, sort of have so much of the platform at their disposal are kind of leading in these sort of toxic ways where it's all a bunch of bombast and bullshit. And to me, it's been my experience, folks who really know what they're doing in that world really don't need to, show off about it at all.
Right, the people that are high achievers, they don't really have to beat their own chest and
I think that's right.
blow their own horn.
I think that's right.
Yeah, what we think of as toxic masculinity is really a bunch of losers. So a lot of it is like the worst example. But you could get the same, there's no term toxic femininity, right? But there's toxic human beings, and some of them happen to be male, and some of them happen to be female. But it's not an indictment on male,
right.
The male gender of the species. That's
right.
Crazy.
Right.
And the idea that you don't need men, that somehow or another, like, the female is the future. It's like, what are you talking about? That's crazy. Yeah. You need a balance. There's a yin and a yang in this life for a reason.
That's right.
All of it goes together.
That's right.
It's just everybody has to do better.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I've really, on this thing that I'm trying to do. I'm really just trying to put up examples of that, men and women who again really really walk that walk and are not leading with sort of just. And trying to give whatever platform I have to those kinds of people who are real examples of that.
What was your big break as an actor? Do you think it was The Walking Dead? Was the big one?
Yeah, I mean,
you were fucking great in that.
Oh, thanks.
You played such a good creep.
Such an asshole, right? Yeah.
But it was so believable. Like all of it was so believable.
Thanks, man.
It was really good.
Thanks. I mean, I think that it was for me, it was the perfect role at the perfect time in my life. These things just like they really married each other. I'd been busting my ass for about 10 years before that and just failing miserably. I think a lot of people think that you just like that I'd been doing it for a long time. But I was still really a pretty big fuck up, Joe, and I was hitting brick wall after brick wall in my life. I was kind of a shitbag. I wasn't a good boyfriend. I was still and having episodes of violence on the street. I was still getting into street fights, still getting into trouble. I was drinking way too much. On July 3rd, 2009, I was out. I lived in Venice Beach. And every July 4th, we had like a really big July 4th party. And I was walking my dogs in Venice Beach, and I stopped because I saw there's like a big house party. It was this thing called First Fridays in Venice where people could drink on the street. And I saw this older couple, and they were playing the didgeridoo. You know the didgeridoos? Mm-hmm. Okay, so they were playing that's pretty good, bro. And so they were playing the didgeridoo, and they were probably like a couple in their 60s. And I saw this one guy outside the party who was kind of like a ringleader. He was dancing around, drinking 40s. They're kind of like wannabe tough guys. And the guy went over to the woman who was playing the didgeridoo, and he lifted it up, and he like put it on his crotch. So it looked like this old woman was like blowing his crotch. And I remember just like looking at her husband, and he was just like broken. And like I saw this couple, like they had to pack their stuff up, and it was just like, and I don't know, Joe, there was like something about that. Like I was drawn to, like I was supposed to see it that day, and I like saw red. And like right at that point, that same guy, he called my dog over. My dogs are super well trained, and I walked them. They weren't on their leash, and I had this one dog named Boss, this great pit bull, and he's like, oh my gosh, look at that dog. We were probably 50 yards away. And he called the dog over, and Boss went over to him. And the guy's like petting my dog and kind of like roughing up my dog a little bit, just kind of like manhandle him because he's a big pit bull, whatever it was. And I called my dog back, and the guy held on to him and didn't let him come back to me. And again, man, some part of me wanted this to kind of happen, and I went over to him, and I grabbed my dog, and I was like, boss, let's go. And I pulled my dog away, and he's like, hey man, get off my dog. And one thing kind of led to another, but I started to walk away, and him and a couple of his friends started to follow me, and he pushed me in the back, and I turned around and I hit him with the right hand, and he got knocked out standing up, and he fell down, and he cracked his head on the pavement. And his friends all kind of jumped on me. I tried to put my back against a tree and do what I could, but they started to get the better of me. Police came, and long story fucking long, you don't look like he wasn't waking up. And they were taking him away. I was like sitting there handcuffed to the side. Some friends of mine came. I got them to get my dogs out of there. But, I'm on the side where there's police everywhere. People are like from that party were pouring beers on my head. And I'm just kind of sitting there. And then they took me down to Pacific Division. And the guy still wasn't waking up. And, I'd gotten in trouble in the past in Washington. And the police were just saying like, hey man, like, if he doesn't wake up, that's kind of that. And, I was handcuffed to this bench in the Pacific Division, and I remember just really having to take a piss, and nobody was letting me, and they were kind of giving me shit about what's going to happen if this guy doesn't wake up. And I remember sitting there on that bench that if this guy doesn't wake up and I'm going in that direction now, I knew, and it was as clear as any thought I've ever felt, that I was going to have to sort of get in touch. I was going to have to be the devil. I was going to, if I was going that route, all this acting shit, all this friends and fun, it's over. I got to go be the worst and most vicious part of myself if I'm going through that door. And it wasn't like something like trying to steal myself or act like I'm, man, I'm nothing special. But I was as sure of anything that that's what needed to happen. And it was clear. And I wasn't scared. I just knew it. But then my next thought, I just looked up and I was like, but if you can just get me out of this, and I remember just saying it, if you can just get me out of this, I swear to you, like I am done. Like I am done. And I will dedicate my life to my lady. I will dedicate my life to my work. And I will dedicate my life to you. And I will dedicate my life to service. Like I will dedicate my life. And, literally, man, I'm not trying to, 1 second later, cop came by and said the guy woke up. And, man, that could have gone anyway. And I know, again, you asked me about Walking Dead, but literally 1 year after that, July 3rd, 2010, I was on set of my first season of Walking Dead.
Wow.
And, not drinking, focused, engaged to be married, had my first kid on season 2. And again, man, I'm like so like profoundly like humbled by that and grateful for that, like so grateful for it. But I'm also like aware of like how unfair it is that so many people don't get that shot. And it doesn't work out that way. And, but yeah, like getting to then kind of play a role like that had a real beginning, middle, and end kind of like built in, it was, and at a time in my life where I just totally stripped all the fat out of my life, the people I was hanging out with, the way I was behaving, I got ridiculously disciplined pretty much about every part of my life. And, so it was, I'm sorry it's such a grandiose answer, but it's Walking Dead, but it was also that time at Walking Dead and the people that I was around and what that all meant. But yeah, it was, my life completely and utterly changed there. And I think the sad thing is, man, it's not like that was the first time that happened. I mean, I had so many times where I should have learned that lesson so many times. And because I had some wiggle room, because I had people looking out for me, because I came from a family with a father who was engaged and had the means and the ability to help me out. And that is so, vastly unfair. And it's a reason why now, I mean, it's like on the show, it's like, why we're hanging out and spending time with so many people in this LWOP community, with the Life Without Parole community in prison. And these guys who, like me, like fucked up, made a horrible mistake, did something without a doubt inexcusable. But you talk to some of these guys and they have this fluency with their shame, this fluency with they've spent so much time living in their in the vileness of what they've done, that they've spent so much time like empathizing and putting themselves in their victims' shoes, that they are different people 20 years later than the crime that they committed, and their entire life now is dedicated to service. It's dedicated, this LWOP community in Calipatria prison that we hang out with, they've really changed so much of the culture in that prison. I mean, that was one of the most violent prisons in all of the state of California, and California prisons are notoriously violent. And this community, they broke down the racial walls. They're this LWOP community, this group, these guys who basically have a living death sentence. They've all banded together. It used to be, you're in a different car, like you're in a different race. You can't even, talk to each other. But these guys, this multiracial group of men, have gotten together and they provide support for each other. They have programming. They have hope. My friend Brett May, who's been on the show, he's a paralegal now. He's gotten his degrees. He was part of the felony murder rule. He was part of a home invasion where someone was murdered, and he didn't pull the trigger, but he was there. And he got life without parole. And when you talk to him about how much time he has spent thinking about the horror that those people must have felt when they woke up and knew he was in the home, and how just utterly disgusted and ashamed he is. Now, look, I'm not advocating to forgive him. I'm not advocating that anybody should free him. I'm not advocating, but I am advocating that we can learn from him and that we should listen to him. And he's such a dedicated father, and he puts all his life now into helping other people who are coming in with this sentence. That if you go into prison and you have that sentence, what are you gonna do? I mean, what are you gonna do? There's no reason not to engage in violent behavior. There's no reason not to try to put money in you and your family's pocket that way. And he goes right to those people and he leads them to a better place. I'm a huge believer that only people that really have been in that valley, can lift others out of it. And I'm deeply inspired by him, man. Deeply inspired.
That's wild. It's so true what you're saying about there's moments in your life where things could have tipped one way or the other, and that's a giant percentage of the people that are locked up.
Totally.
That they could have had an opportunity to turn their life around, but there was nothing there for them.
Mm-hmm. And they didn't have the infrastructure, the people around them, or the power, or the money, or they've been generations of people that have been held down, and it's real, and we had a guy on a couple weeks ago, Richard McKinney. He was a man who he was Marine. He was force recon, and he was overseas, during 9/11, and he developed this like unbelievable hatred for Muslims, and there's a beautiful documentary coming out called Stranger at the Gate that's about his life. And so he, even the guys in his unit were like, hey man, you got to calm down with that shit. And then I believe he got injured, and then he came home. He's from Muncie, Indiana, and he just had this like unbelievable hatred of Muslims, and it just ran kind of everything in his life. And at the same time, the Muslim community in Muncie was growing. There's this wonderful woman who worked at created something called the Muncie Islamic Center, and she's this woman who's she brought in over 157 Muslim refugees into America, and he was seeing more and more Muslims in the community. It was driving him crazy. So he devised a plan to go and blow up the mosque, and he was going to go blow up this Islamic center. He built a bomb. He worked on the plan for over 2 years, and walked in, built the bomb, walked into the center, and when he walked in there, he was met by that woman, Bibi, and she greeted him in this way that he had never seen before, and she invited him. She gave him a Quran, and he really wanted to read it. He thought that he was going to find proof in this Quran that all these people just wanted, Americans dead. I mean, that's just what his mindset was. So he felt like he had sort of won. So he decided to leave that day and come back, still with this plan to blow up the Islamic Center on a Friday, where there would be 200 people there. Then the woman invited him into her home and cooked for him. Now, years later, he's a devout Muslim. He's the president of that Islamic Center.
Whoa!
And they are like family. And I had both of them on the podcast. Man, it's and
holy
again,
shit!
Man, like, yeah, and I don't know, man. It's just like we're so ready to say, fuck you. We're so ready to just slam the door on people. And I don't know. Look, man, you started the conversation. Some of your favorite people in your life are people who really fucked up when they were young. I don't know, man. I think your capacity for going in that valley again is directly relative to your capacity to lifting others out of it, and your capacity to create havoc directly relates to your capacity to create good and connection and growth. And I really believe that,
It's just amazing that one person who is of considerable character and love can change the way that guy thinks about things.
And man, I'll tell you, you sit down with her and brother, in like 2 seconds, you're like, oh wait, you're magic. Like what? She's just one of those people. And I asked her, she would have him in her home and she would cook for him. She's a wonderful cook, and she'd have these huge meals. And I asked him, when you walked into her home, when you ate her food, were you still planning on blowing her up and her family? And he said, absolutely. And I asked her, knowing that now, if you had known that then, like, how would you feel? And she said, look, without missing a beat, I still would have had him in my home. Still would have had him in my home, and that's my job. That's my job. That's my duty.
Wow. Holy shit.
It's crazy.
That's crazy.
It's nuts. But it's real. Like when you see that, when you see
Yeah.
them together, it's not, there's like nothing put on. There's nothing, he's not like, it's so easily to sort of dismiss people as bonkers or like it. But, I don't know.
Yeah, it's very easy to write people off. But even people that are capable of great evil are also capable of great love. It's just people are oftentimes a victim of the thoughts that bounce around their own mind and of circumstance and of momentum. And it's crazy how one moment of meeting one person starts a totally different path in this guy's life.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right. Yeah.
So you go from this horrific moment where you might be locked up in jail for manslaughter for the rest of your life, and then all of a sudden a year later you're on The Walking Dead. You're on this, which by the way, that first season, I think The Walking Dead kind of lost its way later on. I stopped watching it when it became like murder porn. Mm-hmm. But the early seasons, especially like season 1, god damn was that a good show. I mean, it just captivated the minds of people, like, because it was so, obviously it's fiction and it's, it's a horror show, but it so speaks to the human condition when confronted with adversity and horrific circumstances.
What happens when you strip off the veneer of comfort that dictates so much of our behavior every day? And, it was really cool for me specifically to kind of play this character who was the first one that was kind of onto it, the first one that was like, these rules they don't apply anymore in this world, and you can and look, I think for me as just a performer, all the way around, man, is there was a wildness, there was a recklessness that I really sought after, just kind of in my life and in my own behavior, that I was really kind of addicted to. But it always led me to really kind of horrible ends, and I was a real big fuck up. But I found something with this where I could take all of that and put it into work. You know? And it's been that's been my
where
sword,
the
man.
Depth of that character comes from, right? I mean, that's the advantage that you have of having all those fuck ups.
Yeah, I mean, I think so, and the advantage of I also think I'd be curious to hear what you thought about it, but now you are who you are. It's like your intentionality. I think intentionality is so important. Like where are you when you begin? Like what is your goal? Like why'd you start this thing in the first place? And always kind of going back to that. And to keep yourself honest. Mm-hmm. When The Walking Dead started, there was no craft service. There was no it was like a bunch of us in the fucking woods. It was like Frank Darabont. He had done Shawshank Redemption. He had tried to get the show on HBO. They said no. AMC had like Mad Men and Breaking Bad. They're like, all right, we'll do your shitty little zombie show. We'll pick it up for 6 episodes, which basically means we don't really believe in this thing at all, But he got these group of people together, and it was so humble, and everybody so and the thing that's crazy about like a zombie show and about like living in a different world like that, there are rules, right? So if you put a bunch of actors in the woods and you have 6 people walking through the woods, and if you make any noise, the zombies could come. If one fucking actor is sitting there thinking about, okay, like, do I look cool here, or how's my makeup, or if one person isn't fully committed, you literally shit on the entire thing. Like the reality of that world is totally screwed. And it was sort of this like perfect storm of people that were young and hungry and committed. You had a bunch of people who were just starting families. So there wasn't, there was no like going to bars or restaurants or any of that bullshit. It was just really, really gratitude. So lucky to be here. Let's make this work. Who gives a fuck if it's 6 episodes or 12? Let's just make this work. We all believed in Frank. And there's something really to that, to the intentionality behind it. I think that's often something. I had a baseball coach who once said, when you're at bat and things start spiraling out of control, and baseball is such a heady sport, and when you start, all of a sudden you start getting in your head and you start going down that spiral, you need to step out. And he would say, remember why you did it in the first place. Like, remember why you wanted to play baseball in the first place. Go back to the time when you were a kid, when you just fucking loved it, and like go there. And as long as it takes, just go there. Then step back in the batter's box. And I'm asking myself that a lot now. Because there's a lot. How the conversation started doing this podcast with me, where I'm like, why am I doing this? Like what and I keep on having to go back to that thing, because it does, man. It comes with a cost. And especially as the thing grows. But I keep going back to it's the people that I have on. It's the people that I have on. They're the people I want my kids listening to.
Well, you're doing an amazing job with it. And I think having these crazy life experiences and these journeys that you've gone on in your own mind, it really works well because of that, because you're very charitable and you're very compassionate, and it comes through. It's very obvious that you have a more balanced view of what human beings are capable of than the average person.
I appreciate you saying that, man. I think mostly, I just kind of shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? Like, I know that I'm not bringing on people that I don't know. I know them, and we have really, really close relationships. So it's special forces soldiers and fighters and surgeons and teachers. They come from all, but every person within their own community. It's not just that they have this job. It's like, I know them. I know how respected they are in their own community. I know how much they've given me. I know how much they've added to my life, how much value they've put in. And again, it was coming in this vacuum when I just really saw, fuck, man, we were listening to the wrong people. Everyone's just like spouting out all this bullshit. Like these people know, man. These people know. And I'm not saying, hey, they're the end all, but on this subject, they've been there. I promise you that they've really been there. And I think it comes also just in the way that I work as an actor. And you know, the greatest thing about what I get to do is I get to go and, you know, we go do Fury and we get to talk to, you know, guys who were really in tanks in World War II.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's like not that many of those. Those guys are the best among us, you know? I got to, you know, Kevin Vance, it's where I met Kevin Vance, you know, Navy SEAL, just beautiful man who's just taught, he's had such a deep impact on my life. And you know, actors, that to me is everything. And it fucks me up sometimes because I'm actually way less interested in, you know, like what the director or the producer kind of think about what I'm doing. I'm just on those people and that opportunity to learn from those folks. You know, you have somebody, whether you're a vet or a police officer or anything, you open up to somebody and you bring them into your world. Like that's sacred, man. That's a trust that I really value and really means something to me. And it's my sword and work like that it gives you a North Star in this kind of malleable, weird thing where you've got so many different agendas at play and what people kind of want. You know, a film is super collaborative and everybody's got their own kind of agendas there. But you know, if you can find some truth, it's like, man, just go try to do that. You know, learn that trade, learn how to handle that weapon, learn how to coach that tennis. You know, like learn that shit. That's busy work that you can actually do. You can, if you put the time in, you can actually achieve something. It's not just, hey man, let's hope for the best. I'll get it on the next take. Fuck that. I can't. I don't have the. I wish I could. I don't have the stomach for that.
What do you want to do with your show? I mean, your show has picked up all this momentum. Your podcast. It's really gotten to a point where you have a big audience now, and a lot of people are listening into it. Do you have a goal? Did you anticipate it growing to where it is now? Like,
no.
When you first started doing it, did you just do it? Say, I just feel like this is something I'm compelled, and then we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm working with a group of people that I really believe in. There's a group of, you know, young filmmakers and podcasters that I really believe. I think they share the ethos of the show. No, man, you know, I think what the goal is and what we're really trying to do is give a platform to the folks that come on, and I don't mean on my show. So what we're trying to do, like that fishing show that I mentioned, my friend Kevin Vance is now going to go do a show where he's going around and he's talking to special forces. He's talking to members of the community that he really knows and help them deal with issues that they're dealing with. We've got you know, another show like I told you about with the readings that we're putting on with Sloss and Rec. So I mean, ultimately, what I'm trying to do, you know, there's the Silverback Chronicles, which are two career police officers in Baltimore that we had on. They're a group of cops in Baltimore called the Silverbacks. They're a bunch of all black cops, a unit there that are just totally policing for the right reasons, respect to the community. They're no nonsense. They've got an amazing podcast sort of about just, you know, the streets of Baltimore.
And you're involved in all these shows?
Yeah, so like, our job is to give them the infrastructure, and our job is to promote and help all of these different things.
So you're essentially like running a network.
You know, that's what the guys that's the word that, you know, the guys that I'm working with keep using.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing about me, Joe, and it's probably the one area in my life I remain just enormously sloppy. I'm not a businessman. I'm just not. I don't know how to really think that way. You know, I ultimately, you know, ultimately supporting these folks and giving them this platform and then providing them that infrastructure that I can get behind and believe in. And as long as people are still coming to us and wanting to come on and there's people that I'm really interested in speaking with, I'm going to keep doing it. But it's hard, you know. I go to do a role, and for better or worse, I kind of have to shut down, man. I really do, and I'm kind of disgusted by actors who just talk about the process all the time, and it's really not my bag. It's really not something. But for me, there is a necessity to. It's the only way I know how to work is to kind of push everything else out. So I can't do this while I'm doing that. So it's a really hard thing to navigate. It's a really hard thing to navigate.
But what made you decide? Was it the people you're working with that decided to do all these additional shows as well?
Yeah, and I thought I want it to be more than just giving these folks a voice. I want to, my Sebastian Richardson, people called him Bam Bam on the street. He's from Shreveport, Louisiana. Shreveport's I wrote a show about Shreveport. I've been going down there for about 10 years. Bam Bam was in Supermax at Florence, Colorado. He was in prison with Larry Hoover, with El Chapo. He was part of a RICO case in Shreveport in this little neighborhood called the Bottoms. Sort of legendary street guy who was extraordinarily violent in prison. Ended up in Supermax, and people don't get out of Supermax. He was part of the Marshall Project. He was tortured in prison. He was basically blinded there. They kept him zip tied for I believe 253 days. His skin started to grow over the zip ties because he was basically protesting how other prisoners were being treated. So to get him out of his cell to eat every day, he would just welcome it. They'd basically gas him and beat him every single day. He ended up getting out. Now he's a minister. He's an unbelievable guy. He's dedicating his entire life now to the young community of Shreveport, a city that's just ravaged by gun violence right now. And he's got a podcast, so we're supporting that. We're supporting his merchandise. There's so much in that community. We've done a bunch of, we go to the place. We don't have them come to us. So we've done a bunch of shows in Shreveport. Again, it's these stories I think are really worth being told. My friend Alfred Brown, people used to call him Goat. He was a guy who ran this community. He was kind of, I don't love the word, but he was sort of a gang leader down in Shreveport in Louisiana in this community called the Bottoms, and got busted on RICO charges. Ended up doing almost 2 decades in prison. Since he's been out, he's lost 2 of his daughters to gun violence since he's been out. Goat's a kind of guy. They call him Goat. He's the kind of guy that back in the day, he could have you taken off the face of the earth like really easily. Now, when this young man killed his daughter, he testified on behalf of him and said putting another black boy in prison is not going to bring my daughter back. I open up my home to you. I want to open up my church to you. I want to show you that there's a better way. And again, that level of forgiveness, that level of empathy, that level of rehabilitation, the potential that guys like Bam Bam and Goat and Big Don, Reg, these guys down in the Bottoms, their commitment to changing this cycle, it's beautiful, man. It's everything I believe in. And I've learned so much from these guys. So much. And I've also learned so much from Carl Townley, who's the police officer that brought all these guys down. And I've sat the 2 of them down together. And they have so much respect for each other.
Wow.
And they're all just really, really good friends of mine. I love them all.
That's so crazy.
It is, man. It really is. And what's crazy about it, Joe, honestly, is like even like I had my little brother on. I've had all these people on. It's that's not. I hate asking people to come on. That part of it is that part of it is like I think the worst. I hate asking people to come on. That
Why?
is like. I don't know, man. I think a lot of the folks that I have come on have never been on. We shoot it with cameras. Like they've never been on camera before. They're talking about things that are highly sensitive. They're going to places that are pretty dark. To a person, everybody, I think it's been a good experience. But that's just that's a real hard thing for me. I don't like asking that of my friends.
It just you don't like asking because you don't think they would enjoy it, or do you think you're putting them on the spot? You're putting them in a compromising position?
No, I don't think I'm. I think more the second thing you said, that I know that with a lot of these folks, it's just really hard to talk about a lot of this stuff, and it's really and I never want to feel like I'm
burdening them.
Yeah, or taking something from them, or using them in some sort of way. And then again, you got to go back to that intentionality. You got to step out of the batter box, and you got to say, okay, what are you doing this for? And then you remind yourself,
What is their experience after it's done?
Yeah.
Are they happy about it?
Yeah. It's been across the board. I mean, the only people, we do it a little bit differently. Like since I've done, I've been a part of so many interviews as an actor, you're always, there's all these forces at play where you got to be like careful about what you say, which I just find just so ridiculous and so much the antithesis of being an artist. And so I say to everybody that comes on, hey man, we're gonna give you the episode, and anything that you want out, we'll take out, And the only people that have sort of given me a hard time about that is actors, obviously, they're just
it's after the fact,
talking about
right?
nothing that's like at all bad at all. But they're, but I get it, man. I get it. It's, I try not to judge.
Yeah. It's amazing what some people are sensitive about.
Yeah.
But it's great though that most people, the majority of people, are having a good experience from it. So it's coming through. What you're trying to accomplish is coming through.
It's been wild for me, Bo and Jerry they're like, we want to start a fishing show. We're like, fuck yeah, let's go. You know what I mean? And there's been so much of that, and I really do think there is this not just cathartic, but there's just this human need to tell your story. And I think these folks for so long have felt, shit, man, I'm on the front lines of this shit. Like, I'm on the front lines of this shit, and I got to listen to these assholes spouting off like they know about policing, or they know what it's like to come from a community like this,
Right.
or they know what it's like I know. And to a person, it's been wildly positive for people who are doing it kind of for the first time. And I love that. I love that.
It's awesome that you're expanding this thing. Like, you started it kind of on a whim, and now it's kind of growing and expanding, almost like it's a force of its own.
Yeah, I mean, like now it kind of has to be. We had George Christie on the other day, who's he was the longest serving president of the Hells Angels. He was the president of the Los Angeles chapter, and then he started Ventura, and he's got this one man show that he wants to put on that I just can't wait to see. I don't know. I'm just so. I really do. I don't mean to get all kumbaya on you, man, but I really do believe there's something about art and performance that is you can really take. It's kind of like what I was saying. On a much smaller level with me and my own bullshit. You can take all this stuff that's held you down, that maybe you've caused pain to people, you hurt people, you fucked up, or you disappointed your family, whatever it is, you disappointed yourself. You're an awful member. So you can use all that.
It's fuel.
Fuck yeah, man.
Yeah, it's fuel.
And you can use it to go reach people. The pain that you felt is a real adhesive, and you can latch onto them, and they can see, shit, man, I've been there. Like I've been there, and maybe you can stop them from making that huge mistake themselves. Maybe. Yeah. And they're certainly not going to listen to. They're not going to listen to the Punisher. They're not going to listen to my dumb ass being like, "Hey, you really shouldn't do." But hey, man, here's a guy who just went down 30 years. He's coming out of Supermax. He's been where you were. I mean, one of the shows we had, we had, a father and son, and the father was in that life, and now the son is, and they were just talking about what that felt like, what that felt like to, have the police say when he was 1 year old, you're never going to see your son again. And now that this young man, Rick, he's got a little baby girl, and she and it's by talking about it, and then maybe potentially putting that out into your own sort of creative forum, your own creative expression, maybe that will, being on mission, maybe that will do something.
Well, it certainly has the potential. and there's certainly a door open for good, and a door open to give people a chance.
Potentially.
Yeah, well, that's where it all comes from, right? That word potentially, that's hope. That's something. That's a window of opportunity that didn't exist previously. And I think through this intention that you have, and through this very charitable view of human beings that you have, you're projecting that, and you got to think of the hundreds of thousands of people that have watched that and taken that in, and then they can incorporate a piece of that in their own life. Like, inspiration through things like that is so vital. It's so important for people to see how a person can make these charitable decisions and make these views of people in the best possible light, and give them an example, or give them an opportunity to show their best possible self. It's so huge, man. It's like, it's one of the things that's missing in mainstream culture.
Yep.
Our culture, in terms of the way we learn about information and stories, is so polarizing, and it's just looking for bad people. It's looking for evil things, or looking for propaganda to pretend that people that are doing evil things are actually good. It's an amazing thing you're doing. It really is. I think it's fucking beautiful.
I really appreciate you saying that, man. I mean, and look, I mean, not to just throw it back your way, man, but if you look at, this incredible, monumental, unprecedented thing that you've built, I mean, I think, yes, it's deeply entertaining, but you're also like, I don't know, man. This desire to get better, to find new avenues, to be curious, to dig in. I mean, that's to me, that's really what this show is, and and for me, it's one of the most hopeful things I think about our culture right now, that this now has become such a I mean, it's the biggest thing in the world, and I just, it's enormously inspiring, and pretty surreal just to be here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It freaks me out.
I bet.
It's surreal.
How do you prepare, man? I really am interested in that. Like, how
depends on the person.
Okay. Can you give me some examples?
Well, for you, I'm a fan of your work, and I'm a fan of what you've done with your podcast. So I kind of just wanted to talk to you.
Okay.
So there wasn't much preparation with you. I
Okay.
just was like, this guy's cool as fuck. I want to sit down.
Okay.
With other people, like with certain scientists or certain people that are dealing with human rights situations, I want to get an understanding of the scope of the problem that they're addressing and what they've been able to do. Like, I had this guy, Siddharth Kara, on the other day, who is exposing cobalt mining in the Congo.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably the heaviest podcast I've ever done.
Wow.
It's so intense because it's such an insane problem. It's such an insane problem that powers all of the electronic devices that we use, including electric cars. And it's all essentially coming from slaves.
Wow. Wow.
At the bottom of the supply chain is the poorest people on Earth with no electricity, breathing in toxic fumes because they're banging cobalt out of these mines with hammers while they have babies on their backs.
Holy shit.
It's so heavy. It's the heaviest podcast I've ever done, by far. Like you're choking back emotions and tears while I'm listening to him talk, and I'm trying to figure out how do I steer this? What do I say next? How do I react to this? What more information can I extract from him? And he's just such a deeply committed person that has spent years of his life researching this and risked his life exposing this. And I was really aware of this, first of all, through coltan, which is the first thing that I was aware that they extracted from the Congo, through the stuff that the early days of Vice, when they worked on it. And that was when I was first exposed to it, that this is such a huge issue. But I had no idea the scope of it until I started researching this in regards to that podcast. And that's one that was heavy. That's one that requires a lot of thinking about the problem and a lot of like looking at what it's actually like there, and these people that have. This is what it looks like. This is a cobalt mine in the Congo.
Holy shit.
And, the narrative by these electronics companies like Samsung and Apple is that they get everything through ethical sources. Like you can hear the hammers clinking. So with every hammer that's clinking, they're extracting cobalt and also inhaling this poison dust. It's poisoned their environment, poisoned the rivers, poisoned all the land. It's horrific. They live without electricity. They barely make enough money for food. There's no education. There's no hope. And everything is being guarded by commandos who are trying to make sure that the public doesn't ever find this out. Because at the end of this is the most ethical and moral and progressive companies like Apple, which is so crazy hypocritical, filled with hypocrisy. It's so disturbing that that's the reality of the world we live in, that if you have one of these, somewhere a slave contributed to it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no way around it. It's impossible to get ethically sourced cobalt for these phones. And cobalt is integral to the way the heat management, the way it's the way the batteries work. It's fucked. Like beyond fucked, and people are trying to hide this information, including the people that are running these enormous corporations. They have to be aware of it. Tim Cook has to know about this. There's no way he doesn't. And these people are reaping in immense profits.
How did he get how did he get that information? Like how did he get that footage?
He went there. He got that footage with his own phone. That's his phone that took that footage. He went there and risked his life, and he had people that were sympathetic to the cause that got him in and got him the proper paperwork. And, they had guns pointed to his head, roughed up by thugs, thinking this is the end, and luckily got through all of it, but barely. And the stories that he tells about that journey and what it's like, and the passion in his message to try to get this out to people, to try to illuminate this problem and to try to shed light on this situation is unprecedented. It's just an incredible person, just an amazing person that has that sort of dedication to try to get that out. And this is a guy that's also worked previously on human trafficking. That was some other things that he exposed in his previous work. So he's been dedicated to trying to shed light on these horrific situations in the world for decades.
God bless him.
Yeah, God bless him.
Wow.
Heavy.
Yeah.
Heavy.
Wow.
So that's how I prepare. It depends entirely on the person. With a comedian, there's no preparation at all. Right. Like maybe I'll listen to their podcast. With fighters, it's pretty easy because I'm a gigantic fan. Right. And generally when I have someone on, I'm very, very aware of their resume and what they've done. So that's how I do it. It depends on the person.
And what about your what about your level of enjoyment? I mean, are there times where it feels like a slog, or are there times when you're not into it? Are there times when you're extraordinarily excited about someone? I mean, imagine it runs a gamut, or do you try to keep it? Is there something that you do to sort of have a steady and healthy approach to it?
Well, hopefully I know enough about the person's ability to communicate that it's not going to be a slog. And there's very few slogs. But I've had a few where I took a chance on authors and had them come in, and unfortunately they talk the same way they write, where, people write, they're very deliberate and slow, and sometimes people talk deliberate and slow. That's brutal. Yeah. Because as a listen, it's very hard to follow along. Right. And so I'm trying to pick up the pace, trying to do something, aware of my own attention span, to try to just juice it up and keep it going.
And are you in that moment? Are you thinking about the audience, or are you thinking about you in the moment? Like, fuck, this is miserable. This is miserable.
Yeah. I'm like, if it's miserable for me, it has to be miserable for other people, because I'm here. I'm looking in this person's eyes.
What the fuck?
And also, I'm curious about what they're talking about. Yeah. So I wanted to bring them in here because I have a personal interest in whatever this subject is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But most people, it's not. One of the weird question that people always have is who's your favorite guest, or who is a person that you would want to get on the most? And I have the same answer. There's no one. Mm-hmm. I don't have a favorite guest, and I don't have a person that I want to get on. Mm-hmm. I'm happy to talk to you, as I'm happy to talk to Tim Dillon or Joey Diaz or whoever the fuck it is. What Muhammad Bilal, comedians, fighters. Neil deGrasse Tyson, whoever it is.
Yeah.
I'm happy to talk to people.
Yeah.
I like talking to people.
Yeah.
I'm very fascinated by human beings.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by the wide variety of thought processes and life experiences and the way people view the world. And through this thing, I've had an accidental education, like a deep accidental education on so many different subjects. Because I started it out with my friend Brian. We were just smoking weed on a laptop.
Yeah.
Just being silly and having fun. And we thought it'd be a fun thing to do. And then slowly it started gathering momentum and steam and started getting guests. And then it became what it is now.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is accidental, which is real weird.
I bet. I bet, man.
It was real. Someone sent me a video of Times Square today. There's this gigantic LED or LCD, whatever it is, liquid crystal display, huge JRE video that's playing in the middle of Times Square.
Wow.
It's like fucking 50 feet high or something.
Wow.
And I'm looking at that thing. I'm like, that is insane.
Yeah.
That came out of a laptop in my office.
Yeah.
Fucking around and having comedians come over and we'd do hits out of this volcano vaporizer.
Yeah.
And get so obliterated we literally didn't even know what we were talking about while we were talking.
Right.
Just having fun with no pretense and no thought whatsoever that one day this is going to be the biggest media platform in the world. If I ever said that to them back then, they would have fucking laughed in my face. They thought I was an idiot even for doing it. Like, why are you wasting your time?
Right.
You go from doing TV shows and stand-up comedy to this stupid shit.
Right.
What the fuck are you doing?
Wow.
And I didn't have an answer.
Wow.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. It's fun. Just keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a trip, man. And I think about, just the enormous amount of just people talking about you out there. And, just your idea of like, posting and ghosting and just like not, and just not being involved in it and just staying out of it. And I think that too. I think, for me, when I have the mask, when I have the armor of going out there as a character, man, I'm like, fucking, I'll do anything. Like,
right.
Like, I will fucking do it. And I always, I'm not interested in anything safe. I'm like, my acting style is like, I want to create as much danger, and I want it to be wild, and I want it to be unexpected. And my only way of judging whether we had a good day of work is whether like I completely created havoc on set and that it was electric and just like I live for that shit. And so I always want to go as far as I can. And the process, the movies that I've been a part of or the shows that I've been a part of where I've been able to push that envelope to scare people, scare myself, surprise myself, tap into that wildness, that's my only sort of barometer of success. But now, like going out there with this again, with no aspirations of it even going out there, which is very fucking weird. For the first time, getting real, like real blowback, like real, like and
like what kind of blowback?
Oh man, so much. I think that look, man, when I had Shia LaBeouf on, after these allegations came out of him and being physically and emotionally abusive to his girlfriend at the time. And what was crazy was I never wanted to have any actors on. That was kind of like my rule, just because and not because there's just so many podcasts where actors are talking to actors and they're talking about, and I'm actually interested in that shit, but like nobody needs to hear me talk about that.
Right.
But Shia at the time, he was a guy that, when we did Fury together, that was such a wild experience. And, he was this guy who came in, he like pulled his tooth out because he thought his character shouldn't have a tooth. He like cut his face, he didn't shower for 8 months. And at first when I met him, I was like, wow, this guy's just fucking, he's just loud, he's wearing his process on his sleeve, showing everybody how hard he's working. But what I found, after the 8 months of working with him, was somebody who and this is, it's just my own, he is every bit, this thing is every bit as vital to him as it was with me. I found a real partner. I found a real kindred spirit. I found that he was so fucking, he was willing to risk it all for this, for the work. And I walked away with like an enormous amount of respect for him and love for him. I also saw a guy who grew up as a child star, a guy who was, felt like he needed to bleed out for his art, felt that he needed to live wildly out on the street and in real life in order to sort of maintain that danger in his work. And I'm coming from a guy, me at this point, where I did all that when I didn't have the umbrella of being, a big movie star, and I didn't have that. But now I'm a guy who's absolutely a committed husband and father. That is my life. Like my life is my family, and what I found is the things that I can tap into, and my emotional sort of accessibility of being a dedicated father and husband is so much greater than when I was sort of this wild animal. And I care about people way more than I care about myself. My ego is dead in that in that sense. So I really wanted to be there for him. And the first thing I remember seeing him and seeing this like raw nerve and this unbelievable talent, I would say I think he's the best actor I've ever worked with. And I really wanted to protect him. And I think more than anything else, I really wanted to show him what a real friend was like. I just remember like saying that to myself. I want to show you what a real friend is like. I feel like you've never really had a real friend. And my friends, the guys that I grew up with, they've been my best friends my whole life. They couldn't do anything without them. I value that so much, right? So we had him on the podcast real early on, and before this stuff came out, and it was right at a time when he had gotten in trouble down in Georgia, and he went to rehab, and he wrote this movie sort of about his own life called Honey Boy that got nominated for an Oscar, and he wrote it, and he started, and he played his dad. It was a movie about his life, and I kind of had him on sort of celebrating where he was at, because for a long time he had taken a lot of shit from this industry, and here he was sort of on top of the world. And I remember at the time, my agents at the time were calling me being like, you think I could just get a phone call with Shia? Like maybe we could like bring him, he was like, and then these this woman said he did these things to him, and he was just done, canceled. And I'll say, man, when I heard those, when I heard that he had done those things, for me, there really is a red line with people that I need to look at with myself. And through all the shit that I've seen, all the shit that I've done, man, I can't be down with you if you put your hands on a woman. If you put your hands on a woman or a child, dude, I can't, man. I can't. I can't get over that. I can't. And I heard this, about my friend. And, I was really brokenhearted about it. And time went by, like 2 years, and, I know how much, acting is not only important to him, but like sort of necessary for his survival. And I would reach out on text, checking on him and that, but we hadn't made contact. And then I heard that he was having a baby, and he was married. And I reached out to him, and I said, hey, man, maybe it's time for you and me to have another talk. And I made a decision with my team and with him. I needed, again, you go back to the intentionality. And I really looked at this role that you have of being a friend. And being a friend is not about turning your back on somebody when they do something that you find fucking deplorable or when you find disgusting. Your job as a friend is to make sure they don't do it again. And your job now, as this guy's being a father, is to step in there and say, hey, man, where are you at? Like, what are you doing? What kind of work are you doing? Where are you? Like, that's what being a friend is. And everybody in my life was like, worst idea in the world. You cannot do that. You cannot do that. And then, he came on, man. And and we spoke, and you know, it was weird because I found so many of the same themes and so many of the same the heart of what I found in that LWAP community I found in Shia. The level of disgust, the level of work, the level of commitment, the level of shame, the level of time spent, this fluency with his victim. And I had no interest in exonerating him or saying or saving him in any way. I wanted to check on him and I wanted to see how he was doing. And I felt that was an honest thing. And you know, just the fact that I had him on, I got, you know, an enormous amount of backlash, you know, an enormous amount of, for really the first time kind of as like a public person, just like kind of hatred. And the fact that I had given somebody who could have, you know, who may have done these things that this woman says, you know, that really hurt people. And I felt fucking terrible about that, man.
Did you wish you hadn't done it?
No, because after talking to him and then going around and talking to women who have been victims themselves, talking to, you know, this one woman specifically who we were going to have on, but she had health issues and couldn't. But you know what I've found is so many people have reached out who said, like, I was in that place. Like I was in that place where he was. I was in that place where I was, whether I was abusive or not abusive, I was getting there. And the drugs and the alcohol were getting the better of me. And I mean, really what, you know, he was 2 years sober at the time that I had him on. And I thought really what it was like a real meditation and shame, you know? And I thought that, you know, what this woman said to me was, you know, there's so many places and platforms for women to go to. There's shelters, there's places to go to talk about the abuse, to be there to help people after the fact. But who is talking to these fucked up young men who are committing the abuse? Who is talking to them and saying, dude, don't do that? Like, I've been there. There is another way. This is not the answer. Stop. Go get help. Change your behavior. Work. Put in the work. And I just, you know, I ultimately felt, you know, that what he said could have a real positive effect. And I believe, looking back on it now, again, man, it's like, you know, what are you going to do? You can weigh the comments of people who have told you, you know, you're the worst guy on earth for doing it, or you can weigh the comments of the people who say, hey, man, that thing saved my life. Or, you know what I mean? Yeah. I can't look at it that way. I look at the intentionality behind what the show was and why I decided to have him on, and then why I decided to air it, and I stand by it.
Well, good for you. And, you know, uncomfortable conversations with people where you think that what they did is horrific, they're still important conversations. It's a part of being a human being. Just like having these people that have committed murder and have gone to jail and have been drug runners and criminals, and having conversations with them about their journey and about retribution, about their emerging from this and become a better person. All of that is important.
And I think, I don't know, man, I don't know how you feel about this, but I often, I'm not sure exactly how to articulate it, but sometimes the tenor or the quality of kind of like the threat or the punishment kind of tells you all you need to know. And let me try to explain what I'm saying. All these people that were saying, you know, definitely don't have him on, definitely don't, you know, the same people that before, you know, were saying like, hey, just get me a meeting with him, you know, are now saying stay away from him at all costs, right? But without listening to him or what he sort of has to say. And the same people that were sort of applauding and getting behind the fact that we're giving a voice to folks who have murdered, like you said, who've committed murder, who have gotten to these, you know, have engaged in super serious criminality and talking openly and honestly about it.
Yeah.
You know, they're sort of applauding that, but they're saying stay away from this.
Yeah.
And so it was clearly like, you know, the reason to stay away from it, the reason to ignore it, you know, would have been what? To, you know, career safety? You know, like I can't, you know,
Right,
that's not
right,
a reason to,
right.
that, you know, like if you know, what kind of message is that to you, to your kids?
I had a conversation with my friend Brian Simpson yesterday, who's a stand-up comic, brilliant guy. And one of the things we talked about was Will Smith slapping Chris Rock.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Rock, who's in our world is, you know, he's one of the Mount Rushmore. He's a king. And, you know, his take on it was like, that guy, fuck that guy forever. And, you know, what do you do with that guy? Like, there's a lot of us in the beginning, we're like, fuck that guy, fuck you forever. And I'm like, no, you know, now thinking about it, I'm like, that guy has to be forgiven. Like, he clearly has deep remorse for what he's done. And he's also clearly living in a world where he was given nothing but adulation and praise for most of his life. And then all of a sudden, he has this one, in many people's eyes, unforgivable moment where he does something just so fucking stupid. But it's not like he doesn't realize it. He's a human being. You just got to forgive him. You know, and I think the real person who has to forgive him, if he wants to, is Chris Rock.
That's right.
You know, and I don't know if Chris will, you know. I haven't even talked to Chris about it. You know, last time I saw Chris, it didn't come up at all. Like, we talked about how Chris is on a renaissance of his stand-up right now. His stand-up has never been better.
That's what I've heard.
Everybody that saw him, so like, dude, he's on fire. It's like old school Bring the Pain Chris Rock. And I think it's because he got awoken to what he got into this for in the beginning. For a lot of comics, being able to host the Oscars is like, you're not just you're in with the most important crowd possible. You are not just one of the greatest comics of all time, but you're also the guy that can host the Oscars. And it's just like this unachievable honor that such a small handful get to that spot. And he got to that spot and was humiliated. And I think it just reignited what made him a comic in the first place. He's an outsider. We're all outsiders. And you want to be an insider? The compromises that come with becoming an insider are not worth it. Like what you're trying to do is you'll be more of an insider by not doing that. You'll be more of a legend by going back to his roots, and that's what he's doing. If he wants to forgive Will Smith, you know, that's totally his choice. I don't know what his relationship with Will Smith is. I know he'd been taunting him and making jokes about him forever, but they're pretty fucking mild jokes. You know, it wasn't that horrible. And my perspective on it is that just Will's just a person that was in an impossible to understand scenario. To be a guy who's a child star who goes from that to become one of the most beloved actors in the world, blockbuster films, everybody loves you, to this one thing where everybody fucking hates you. Everybody thinks you're a piece of shit. He's a human. You got to forgive him.
So what advice would you give Will?
What he's already done. I mean, I think what he's done has been too coordinated and produced. You know, I mean, he gave an apology with multiple camera angles. That's crazy. It just needs to be you and your phone.
Right,
Just
might be potentially part of the problem in the first place.
Yeah, set up your phone. Say something into your phone that you and you know, I think he has reached out to Chris, but I don't think Chris is interested in talking to him. You know, he'll be forgiven. It'll take some time. It's not the worst thing that people have done.
Right.
It's the embarrassment and shame that he felt from it is the absolute appropriate response. He's not doubled down and said, fuck that guy. If I see him again, it's on site. There's none of that stupid shit. You know, it's.
Can you imagine?
Imagine if he did that.
Got you, bitch. Coming for you next time, motherfucker.
Next time
Close
it's my
fist.
left hand.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'll tell you, it's you know, I was the movie that you know he got the Oscar for, King Richard. I was in that movie, and I was at every award show. You know, and you know, it was weird. I didn't go to the. I decided not to go to that Oscars. My son had a doubleheader in his travel baseball team, and I was like, you know, man, I'm hanging out with Big Bill today. And,
good for you.
And I was watching it with my other son Henry, who knows Will, who also was just like, you know, why'd Mr. Will do that? You know?
No.
And what was crazy is, you know, I'm an enormous fan of Chris Rock's, you know, and you know, but I know Will, you know, and I know that Will would hate the fact that my son had that feeling, and you know, for me, you know, working for a whole year with him on that movie, and then going on the press tour and the award circuit, like, look, man, I've never in my life seen someone who is like kinder or more generous, or more, like it was such an insane moment that revealed such, you know, unhealth, just like a lack of health in that moment.
That's a great way to put it.
It's just like he is not in the, and so horrible, and you know, look, just like as a man going and putting your hands on another man whose hands are behind their back, just like as a like,
not just that, but Chris Rock is this tiny guy,
100%. So
it's
just
not a threat at all.
100%. And it's like, would you? Yeah, exactly. Right. So there's all that. But look, I think it's like, you know, it's odd, because it's like, you know, for me with my friends, it's like I try to judge them not for their worst moments, for their best, and try to get to the bottom of what's going on, you know. But yeah, it was you know, I just remember really palpably feeling that, like when my son saw it, like fucking Will would have hated that, like the Will I know, would have hated that.
I'm sure he did. I'm sure he does. I'm sure he thinks about it every day. I'm sure he's like brushing his teeth, going, "Fuck!
Yeah.
Like, what did I do?" And you know, I think it also was an accumulative event of the public humiliation that he felt going on his wife's show, and her talking about her relationships with other men, including men that were friends with her son. The whole thing was just so, for him to deal with that publicly had to be so torturous, that I think that he just felt this need to stand up for himself in a very poorly thought out, I mean, not thought out at all, you know, just impulsive, yeah. Horribly impulsive. And also just speaks to the ego, like where his ego had gotten him to this place where he thought he could do that. And he thought he could yell, "Keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth," in front of the Academy. The world. All the cameras, saying it to Chris Rock, who made the most innocuous joke. All of it is so crazy. But the other part about it is, to me, like as a human that enjoys a little bit of chaos, I like when things get fucked up, because it lets people know that all this bullshit about tuxedos and clapping and horns playing and the curtains drawn and open and closed, and it's all bullshit. We're just human beings.
And as you said about Chris Rock's comedy now, there is a potential here for both of these men that could have been, in a way, in a strange way, the most important, potentially best moment in either of their artistic life.
Yes.
That where they could go from that. And I think, like, again, I go back to me hitting that guy. You know, a year later, July 3rd, 2010, I wrote that guy a letter saying that, you know, the person that I hit that night, that wasn't you. That was a part of me that I needed to fucking squeeze that.
Did you ever meet him again after that?
I mean, I met him in court, you know what I mean? Depositions, you know what I mean?
Whatever happened with the court case?
Well, you know, I got off. I got off in a way criminally, you know, because it was, you know, felony assault, man, and you know, attempted manslaughter. You know, it was real. But there were so many people there that had seen that there was 10 of them and one of me, that it got reduced down to a misdemeanor, battery causing serious bodily harm. And look, you know, I mean, it's one of those cases of the legal system, you know, really providing, you know, sort of, you know, it's all carrots and sticks, right? And for me, I was placed on this probation for 3 years that said, you know, had I be not even arrested, but like had I been present at a violent crime anytime in those 3 years, mandatory year in LA County Jail. How'd I get charged for a crime? It was 10 years. For a violent crime, 10 years. So for a guy, unfortunately, it was like, and I'm disgusted to say this about myself, but that was not like that crazy of an event for me at that point in my life, which is so fucking disgusting. But, you know, it meant like change everything, man.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I think change for people is really tough. I think
really
you gotta, yeah, man, you gotta rip out this like whole part of your identity, man. You gotta just like get rid of it. But then you're walking around with this fucking hole, and everything that made people laugh, everything that you know made people that you think like you, and then that want to be around you, and that made you attractive, or that made you, it's gone. Yeah. So then you gotta start filling it with other shit. You know, you gotta start filling it with good shit. You know.
Yeah.
And
did he respond to your letter?
No.
Probably has a headache.
Fuck, man. Well, what ended up happening, man, it was crazy, is he ended up suing. You know, I had just done, probably going to get in so much trouble for this, but I had just done Night at the Museum 2. I played like Al Capone in Night at the Museum 2, like, you know, and the posters were like everywhere around LA. And I was one of the so I was on the poster, so my face was everywhere. So he saw that. And he was like, oh, he sued me for $2 million. And I had like no money back then. And so, you know, when I was starting a family, you know, with my wife, you know, I had to figure out, you know, I had these legal fees and these deposits. It was all about the civil case. He had this big lawyer who's just like, you know, coming to the boxing gym that I train in, like, you know, following me around, you know, putting me on camera in these depositions, you know, saying he's going to come into my house and grab my pregnant wife and depose her, you know, serve her, you know, trying to get a rise out of me. It was the biggest acting performance of my life. I was, you know, I wanted to, you know, reach across the table and, you know, choke this guy. And I was like, well, why would you do that, sir? Like, my wife's done nothing to you, know, but, you know, I don't know, but even that, man, like, you know, there was so much shame and so much disgust for the way that I was living my life. Like, you know, man, I got away scot-free and you know, ended up having to, you know, spend a ton of money and that I didn't have, and really set us back as we were trying to start a family. But again, I really, that moment, weirdly, even it was as low as I kind of felt like I had ever been. I think in a lot of ways really saved my life.
Those moments are critical, and there's ways you can respond to those moments, and you responded in the best possible way, I think. And, you know, life is chaos. There's a lot going on, you know, and if you encounter something as bad as what you encountered, you know, all the things that you described and the way you described it, I probably would have done the exact same thing today, unfortunately. You know, like, what do you do? Like, when you're confronted by something, that part of you is triggered, and you realize that this piece of shit is pushing you from the back, and you can just flatline them. It's very difficult to not do that.
Yeah, I think it takes, I mean, I think then, you know, for me, it was like really doing a lot of work, man. Like really doing, you know, I had like court-ordered anger management. I think, you know, other times where I had court-ordered stuff in my life, I was like, you know, court-ordered, you know, drug rehab. Like, it's just get high as fuck and go in there. You know what I mean? You know, like, I'm gonna trip acid and go to, you know what I mean? Go see if I can, like, you know, pick up a girl in here. You know, like, just like a total asshole. But you know, for me, you know, I mean, it sounds crazy, but I mean, just for people out there that might be dealing with that kind of stuff, like, you know, keeping an anger journal, like figuring out what pisses you off, like figuring out like how long it pisses you off, figuring out what triggers you, figuring out what it makes you think you really want to do to people, like really working on that shit. You know, I don't know, man. And look, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm still me, and I know exactly. You know, it's like it's my kids and my wife, man. Just as long as you know. But besides that, I'm not going to get into any. You know, no, you can't. You know, nothing's going to make me mad. I'm filled with gratitude.
Well, you're on the right journey. You know, you had a pivotal moment in your life, and you self-corrected. It's huge. It's huge for anyone to hear that too, because that's possible, and you don't think it's possible when you're in the depths of it. When you're in the depths of something that's awful, you just feel like this is my new reality. But oftentimes through that new reality, that's where the growth comes, and that's where the change comes, and that's where, you know, you are an accumulation of your life experiences and how you respond to those experiences. And sometimes profound things can cause profound change, and in your case, for the better.
That's right. That's right. And there's nothing more powerful than changing, and you know, I'd like completely support. I completely support and believe in anyone's ability to do that. And I think the more we write people off and we use these unbelievably insignificant, you know, sort of means to not be forgiving or to put people in these boxes, it's a huge mistake, man.
It's a huge mistake for the person that's doing that too.
For sure.
Because they have this unflexible, uncharitable view of people forever. Like, what if that comes around on you, man? Yeah. You don't want that. You don't want that for you, and you don't want that for other people.
That's right.
Again, we're all just human beings. But we lose sight of that because these kind of conversations where people get to fully express all the emotions and thoughts behind that, they're not that common.
It's crazy.
And they're very recent, in fact, in humanity. We really haven't had like enormous platforms where people can express themselves the way you just did. And it can affect so many people in a positive way. That's one of the beautiful things about what you're doing with your show, is that you're giving a voice to these thoughts and circumstances and situations and people that it's not easy to hear that voice. That voice is not amplified. It's not on mainstream media. It's not in newspapers. And even if it is, you're not going to read it. It's just you put it in a very digestible way that is impactful to many, many people. And there's people out there that I'm sure are listening to this right now and listening to your story and realizing that they have an opportunity in their life to enact the same kind of change and the same kind of positive change of direction that you did for yourself, that they can do it for themselves too. And they can realize that it's, you know, you look at a person, and we always like to look at a person as if they're this static thing. And it's one thing that I really came to grips with becoming a father, is that I used to think of people as like, oh, this is Bob, he's 40, he's a piece of shit. Now I think, oh, that was a baby. Yeah. That was a baby, and he either wasn't loved or was abused or was in a terrible situation, and through bad life choices and bad circumstances, surrounded by the worst people, one event leads into the other, the momentum carries him into a terrible place, and now here Bob finds himself at 40 where people think he's a piece of shit. And I'm sure he self-defines by that too because of other people's opinions.
So true. And I mean, that perspective, that, you know, the fatherhood thing, that just changes everything.
Changes everything. There's a monumental shift. First of all, seeing life that didn't exist before and realizing that it came about through you and your wife is so strange. It's so psychedelic because it's like you know, people, parenting changes you. You say that to someone who doesn't have kids, they really have no fucking idea what you're talking about. But I've seen it in so many of my friends that they have children, and all of a sudden there's this softening of who they are and this understanding of what's really important, you know, and that what's really, it's so cliche, but love is what's really important. Friendship, love, and trying to get over your own bullshit and figure out life for you. What is the best path for you, and what are the steps that you have to do every fucking day to stay on that good path? Because it's so easy to make change for a little while and then slide right back into your old bullshit.
That's right. It's got to be, and nothing will provide that vitality for you, and how utterly and absolutely essential it is in having kids. Nothing. Yeah. And I think for me, I mean, I even look, you know, I have to spend so much time on the road, and I hate that. But, you know, while I'm gone, you know, the reason why, you know, I'm not like fucking eating Chinese food and like at the bar is because, you know, I'm away from my kids and I'm putting my kid's name on my work. So it's like, I'm going to be committed to whatever I have to do for that. Like that really fucking matters to me. Like, I really want them to look back and say, you know, dad put it all in there, you know? I mean, that's funny. You know, one of those guys from Shreveport, Rich Wilson, you know, he told me, like, right when I was having my second kid, you know, guy grew up on the streets, you know, and really seeing an unbelievable amount. You know, I asked him, you know, what's the what advice will you give me, being a father? And he's just like, all that shit that you're doing that you shouldn't be doing, just stop doing that. You know what I mean? I was like, fuck, dude. I'm like, but you know what I mean? The exaggerating, the whatever it is, the flimsiness, you really want these qualities. You really want to nurture these qualities in your children. Just cut them the fuck out with you, and I think there's really something to that.
I think so too. I think this is a good way to end this.
Right on, brother.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate it. This is everything I thought it was going to be.
I appreciate you having me, Joe. It's a real honor.
Tell everybody how they can watch your show, how they can consume it.
Oh, the podcast?
Yeah.
It's Real Ones with John Bernthal, Spotify.
There
thanks,
is.
Man, putting it up there because I don't
Look at the picture.
It's so bad. Dude, look at that mustache. My kids used to come over when I had that mustache. They would I had that for all of COVID. They would just rip the shit out of that mustache. On Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube and stuff like
Beautiful.
that. Thanks, man.
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate it.
Bye, everybody. Appreciate you too.